When did you realize a child might actually be the devil? My younger brother is a psychopath. We are 13 years apart. When I was very pregnant with my second child, he tried to drop-kick me in the stomach and said he wanted to get rid of my little one. He was mad because I wouldn't let him play a video game. Another time, when he was around 6 or 7, he took a baseball bat and jumped on the neighbor's car hood and started bashing it on the hood and roof, making dents. The neighbor came out horrified, and when he yelled at my brother, my mum came out and threatened to whoop my neighbor's butt. My mum is part of the reason my brother is such a little turd. He's 17 now, and I'm sure he'll end up in prison someday. I did childcare for a family with 3 kids. A girl who was 10 and 2 boys who were around 8 and 5. The youngest boy was a jerk, to be honest. He was just mean. He'd hurt his siblings and me. Obviously, a 5-year-old doesn't cause much damage, but he'd really dig his nails into you, pull your hair, stuff like that. And he'd find it funny. He was also kind of manipulative and knew that he could get away with anything, and seemed to play on that. He was extremely angelic looking, blonde hair and blue eyes and cherubic face. But he was a monster. One winter evening, I picked up the 3 kids after some school performance and went to the local cafe. It seemed all of the parents were going there to socialize, and we were all being picked up by the family's mum. So I was chatting at one of the tables with the parents while the kids played around. There were probably 15 kids of varying ages running around causing havoc. Suddenly, above the din, I hear a scream of pain. Quite obviously, a different noise to the normal yelling and shrieking. I was too far away to see what had happened, but I got a horrible feeling in my stomach. Then one of the siblings ran up to me and told me what had happened. Apparently, the 5-year-old crap bag had grabbed the hands of another kid and pressed them against the boiling hot radiator, holding them there while the kid screamed. I ran over and berated him. The mother had already got to her own child, and he showed not 1 ounce of guilt or remorse. He was smiling when I ordered him to apologize to the other boy. Jesus, I'm half convinced he's a budding psychopath. Myself and all the other neighborhood kids used to catch frogs, salamanders, newts, the usual things. We even had it down to a ridiculous level in retrospect, where one of my friends could perfectly imitate the mating call of a tree frog. She was a sweet girl, grew up pretty weird later on. Her little brother was a bit crazy though. We had those styrofoam rockets from a museum of science where the hollow rocket sat on a plastic cylinder. When you slam down the whole apparatus, the air pressure would shoot the rocket up into the air 20 to 40 feet or so. Well, her little brother stole our frogs one day and put them in the rocket. Cue my friend screaming in horror as she realizes what he's about to do. Those frogs more or less exploded inside the rocket. We stopped using that rocket. Well, we don't know that he knew what would happen. No idea how old that kid was, but it's entirely possible that he wanted to make astronaut frogs. The sad part is, if he wasn't a psychopath, this will probably haunt his thoughts from time to time. And also, if you hadn't already worked it out, there are some messed up stories coming up. You've been warned. I work with emotionally disturbed kids, so, I see a lot of kids doing evil stuff. The worst one was when a kid grabbed a 3/4 full carton of milk and peed in it to fill it up. He then, calm as anything, yelled for the principal to come out. As soon as he walked out of his office door, the kid threw the milk/pee all over him. The principal was wearing a down jacket, and I'll never forget the milky pee soaking into it, covering his face and hair. It was my first week working in this sort of environment, so I hadn't reached the point where I'd normalized it, and was so beyond horrified. Honestly, the calm, creepy manner he did it in, and the joy he got, makes this situation stick out more than the kid who cut up a rat, or the kid who set a frog on fire. I didn't witness it, but it happened at my local school. A 10-year-old girl with a heart defect was strung up with a skipping rope by some kids in her class. I can't even comprehend what those little monsters were thinking. It makes me sick to my stomach that a 10-year-old kid would do something like that. She survived, thought I should add that in. When I was in preschool, some kid, a little mental, snuck up behind me with safety scissors and snipped a hole in my cheek. That's the only clear memory I have of preschool. I was bleeding like crazy. Sorry to disappoint you guys, but it was on my right face cheek, not my rear cheek. My neighbor's daughter, who was 4 or 5, stomped on her rabbit in the garden while chanting, "This is for your own good," with each stomp. I told my neighbor what I saw, but my daughter would never do that. And now we don't even say good morning to each other. I saw my 5-year-old neighbor unalive a puppy for fun, and then he tried to blame it on my brother. Luckily, I witnessed the situation and cleared things up. My cousin, 6 or 7 years old I think she was jealous of the new puppy, so she threw the little buddy out of the window. I remember her mum telling us "Well, kids do crazy things," with an awkward smile on her face and being terrified on the inside. I interviewed an elementary student about what he wanted to be when he grows up. He said serial killer. Alarming, but I just responded that wouldn't work out very well. What about a job? So he says he wants to be a police officer. And it's an interview, so I ask him why. Does he want to keep people safe? And he just told me he wants to use a weapon. That was it. I hope he doesn't make it. I was a careers advisor and a kid told me he wanted to do a butchery apprenticeship. So I started discussing options with him and found him some vacancies to apply for. We set a meeting to start filling in application forms the week after. 5 minutes after he left, his teacher came in and said I shouldn't help him find a butchery apprenticeship because he'd already killed a bunch of small animals ranging from a hedgehog to his own dog, and was openly on the lookout for a horse to skin. He'd also asked what would happen if he stabbed her in the neck with a compass. So teaching him knife skills was not a good idea. That kid was tall, built, and powerful. My 7-year-old cousin shoved her cat into a duffel bag and zipped it shut. Kept it in there even after it peed itself and threw up. Needless to say, my family found a better home for the cat. When I was about 4, I did this. Not till it peed itself, but my cat was my best friend and I wanted to take her to school with me. My mother quickly helped the cat before anything went too bad. When I was around 8, me and a couple of friends found a pretty large horned lizard in my grandmother's backyard. I was always fascinated by animals growing up, so I was super excited and examining how awesome it looked. Then my friends beat it to a pulp with sticks and rocks. I screamed at them that they were the worst human beings in the world and went inside and locked the door. I refused to let them use the phone to call their parents to come pick them up, so they ended up just walking home. Screw those guys. A friend of mine's daughter poked in the center woofer thing of my really expensive speaker system. When I told her she couldn't do this, she laughed in my face and seemed to enjoy my disappointment. She didn't get any flack from it from her parents either, as at their home it's a mess and the kids can do whatever the frick they want. I'm of the opinion, my house, my rules. Don't break my crap, you children of the corn. I want to tell a story I witnessed at a playground. It was along the lines of, older brother is fed up with little brother, so takes a plastic shovel and smashes little brother over the head in the style of Tom and Jerry. Couple of weeks back, I saw my nephew for the first time in ages. My wife and I had kept our distance because he was pure evil. But it had been so long we felt like we had to make an effort and go visit my sister. Well, the little 5-year-old crapbag was now next-level evil. Screaming at his mum, throwing things at the furniture, my parents' furniture by the way, they were visiting, kicking their cat, shouting over the top of us if we tried to calm him down. He frickin' shouted until he was red with rage, veins popping, then stormed off upstairs after we said he couldn't play in the garden because it was night time. My sister was at the bottom of the stairs and I saw her and thought she'd be upset. I looked at her and asked if she was alright and she just sighed, "Yeah," as though it was the most normal thing in the world. I asked if she wanted me to go talk to him, so I went upstairs and he'd shut himself in my parents' room and was leaning against the door, so I couldn't get in. Obviously, being an adult, I forced the door open. He runs to a corner of the room and I calmly went over to him and made the mistake of getting on my knees to be at his level. And the little crap bag just punches me square in the face. I couldn't believe it. I just got up and went downstairs and said to my wife, "Come on, we're going." And my sister kind of just said, "Okay, that's fair." We'd been there maybe 30 minutes total. I don't think we'll be visiting for another year or two at least. I was the child. The day after my dad had his vasectomy, I kicked him in the crotch. I was only 4, but still. Well, thank you for at least confirming that some of the heinous little monsters turn out okay. I definitely did things that were at the very least quite cruel, and I think I turned out alright eventually. Kids like that face-punchy one might need professional help. Most of us just need good parental correction. In high school, my twin sister connived with my 12-year-old sister to wash the toilet with my toothbrush. They did it after I yelled at my twin for lending my clothes to a girl who was a serial clothes stealer. I got strep throat, and they decided not to tell me until years later. They laugh about it, and my parents were so horrified they refused to believe it despite being confirmed by the culprits. Also, my niece peed on her dad's PlayStation at like 3 years old. She also tried to put her number 2 in his coffee. Some kids at my bus stop shoved the outcast kid into a porta potty and tipped it over, side door down. It was pretty evil. I stopped 2 children throwing bricks at a cat while it was stuck under a fence. I'll never forget it, and I'll never understand how they could have been so wicked in the first place. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was younger, I got invited to spend the day with a friend and her family at her farm. They'd just bought it, and the parents couldn't keep their kids entertained while they were fixing up the place, so I was brought along. I didn't know them super well, and I wasn't friends with the girl or anything, but I don't think she had many friends, so I got invited anyways. My friend had a little brother who, after a while of seeing horses and playing tag, suggested we go catch some frogs or toads. I thought that was great fun, so we all did. And then after we put them in a little area, at least 9 or 10 of the little guys, the younger brother brings out 2 long, twisty metal poles. He takes a frog out and sets it down, and happily smashes his metal pole into the frog, impaling it. I was shocked, thinking, did that really just happen? I was a really sensitive kid, so I started crying and begging him to stop hurting the animals. He told me there was an extra pole if anyone else wanted to impale the frogs as well. His sister told me he does this all the time and tried to calm me down, but it didn't help because the whole time she was trying to soothe me, this kid was choosing the next frog and smashing it. I tried to set the frogs free, but he wouldn't let me. Eventually, I ran a little ways away. I didn't want to be around her brother for the rest of the day. I was too scared or embarrassed to call my mum and ask her to pick me up, so I spent the whole day there, really uncomfortable and kind of sad. Some kid in my elementary hugged the class pet so hard that its eyes popped out. Witnessed my 6-year-old niece trip her 4-year-old cousin so he fell and slammed his head into the concrete floor. She then smiled and said he tripped over his shoelace when the other adults turned around. When I was in a nursery, ages 3 to 4, I was a very anxious kid who was really attached to my mum, to the point where I'd cry for her for damn near an hour when I got dropped off. To aid this, my mum gave me a soft toy, a panda who went by the name of Pindy. I frickin' loved him and took him everywhere, including nursery, to help me overcome my homesickness. Anyway, I was messing around on my own because I didn't get on with any of the other kids, and this random girl just runs up and snatches Pindy from me and runs away. I obviously start chasing her to get him back, and the evil little monster turns around, pushes me into a wall, and proceeds to beat 3 kinds of stupid out of me with my own teddy. Damn near got away with it since there weren't any supervisors in the area I was in, but luckily one of them heard and came to investigate. I was on vacation in Turkey, and we had a couple of cats around the hotel. Some stupid kids between 8 and 13 were throwing glass at the cats, and me at the age of 12 told them to stop while trying to impress a girl I met at that hotel. They didn't listen and kept throwing glass at the poor cats who screamed for help. Out of pure anger, I threw glass at them, and the glass shattered right in front of their legs, and a couple of them got glass on their legs and feet. 2 hours later, their father turned up and hit me in the face. Told my parents, and my mum kicked him in the nuts while my dad was violently arguing with some other guy of that family. I don't know how it ended, but we got to stay in the hotel, and they were gone the next day. Don't you frickin' hurt animals, especially cats, when I'm around. I had a neighbor kill my pet bunny when I was 6 and he was 13. She was a baby bunny, and I was so careful with her, and I really loved her. And this boy my dad made me play with, because his dad would sell mine substances, decided to pick her up by her little ears and just break her neck one day. She was a good girl and didn't deserve what he did to her. 2 things come to mind. First, when I was a child, we had neighbors up the street who I would often play with. My friends had a little sister, who was about 4 at the time this occurred. The neighbor's cat ended up having kittens, and I went to go look at them after they were old enough to adopt, thinking I could persuade my anti-cat parents into getting me one. And that's when I saw the youngest picking them up by their tails and flinging them around while giggling. Her parents barely scolded her. I went home crying, and my family promptly adopted 2 of the kittens to get them out of there. I guess I got what I wanted, cats, but I wish we could have taken them all. And second, I was at a sleepover in middle school where this happened, but I didn't participate in the truly bad parts of this story because, fortunately, my preteen conscience was decently developed. My friends were your stereotypical cool 12-year-old girls, and they decided it might be fun to sneak out and walk around the neighborhood. While on our midnight stroll, we came across a very nice convertible whose owner had left the top down. When they decided it'd be fun to prank the car, I said I had to be up early for some extracurricular, and went back to my friend's house because my parents were strict as frick, and I didn't want to get into trouble for trashing someone's car. I found out the next day they'd tossed bottles of pee inside. I didn't ask if the bottles were open or closed because I didn't want to know, but I still feel guilty to this day for not trying to stop them. Karma got me for my silence though, because after I got my first car, someone smashed the crap out of it in a parking lot and didn't leave a note. A neighbor's kid, around 6 or 7 years old, would throw his 3 cats into the river and force them to swim to shore. He didn't care if they drowned in the currents. I wanted to toss this cruel kid into the river himself. Yep, a few of us are right there with you. Man, I probably should have predicted this, but there is a lot of very unwanted animal cruelty in this one. I guess I can't put my finger on whether that's better or worse than these kids inflicting it on their peers, though, so we'll just keep reading them all out. Punched my gentle giant of a dog right in the face. Dog had just walked into the living room, in her own home, and the visiting 7-year-old punched her in the face. Kid's mum said, "He just doesn't like animals." Never had them over again. This one is pretty tame, but I thought it would be worth a chuckle. I used to attend a weekly board game club, and some of the kids that showed up there were pretty wild. This one little girl, about 11 to 13 I think, in particular, was a notorious cheat, and usually up to no good. Anyway, she comes up to me with her phone out and starts recording me because I was singing a song and kind of failing at it. She says she's going to put it on YouTube, and I tell her, no, I don't want a video of me singing badly on YouTube. Well, she persists and says she's going to upload it anyway. Knowing the whole thing is a joke, I start saying that I'll take her to court if she uses my likeness without consent. She caves and wanders off for a bit. She comes back a few minutes later, still recording me. She asks, "Hey, the sky is blue right now, isn't it?" And without thinking, I reply, "Yes, it is." She wanders off again. About 20 minutes later, she comes back and says she's going to upload me singing again because I gave her consent. Obviously, I didn't. Then she shows me the video she'd been working on for the last while. "Hey, is it okay if I upload this video of you singing?" "Yes, it is." "Okay, thanks." I was at a loss for words. This girl's going to be a Fox News journalist one day. When I was renting an apartment in the city, the neighbors had a 9-year-old daughter who had learned in school that if you claim a man behaved inappropriately with you, the police will come. Well, she happened to like the flashing lights. The saddest part is she called 911 so many times with this crap just so she could see the lights that the cops started showing up with no lights and her mother was fined. It was an innocent kid thing, but not really innocent, since she would claim one of several older male neighbors was, well, being really bad. A couple of them were actually brought in and then released, thankfully without the media being informed of the reasons. I had this professor who taught the cognitive psych course a year after I'd taken it. She had been talking to our substance misuse and mental health professor, a very cool dude in my opinion, about how she used to work at some kind of camp for troubled kids. I remember hearing them talking behind me as they were going into the building. Apparently these kids had major issues. An 11-year-old had killed a squirrel on one of the nature hikes. When she asked them why, they said, "I wanted to know what it sounded like when it died." Irrelevant tip: teach your kids they're capable of inflicting adult-sized damage. Growing up, there was a very bizarre and angry kid who lived on the street behind where I lived. He was a bit of a butthole, but unlike most bully situations, the people he was a jerk to were jerks right on back, including my brothers and I. Looking back on it now, he probably had a pretty rough life at home based off the things he did. One story stands out. It was winter and there was snow and ice all over. I was probably around 10 or 11 at the time. I go out back and hear my first childhood dog yelping. I see this kid throwing ice at my dog. He didn't even live in the house behind ours. Some elderly nice couple did. But he was in their backyard throwing ice at my dog and scoring hits on her. Not going to lie, when I saw this I got my dog inside and my brothers and I chased this motherfricker down to his house. I'm not proud of this, but I taught him a lesson. I grabbed a big sheet of ice and smashed it over his head. He bled a bit from his head and staggered back to his house screaming and crying. He never messed with my dog again. He only lived in the neighborhood a few years and then his family moved away. I forget his first name, but remember his last one, which I won't say here. Hopefully, he got help. I had this little 4-year-old student that I was convinced is completely sociopathic. He was remarkably eloquent for his age and as sweet as peach pie. When the adults were watching, that is. One of the teachers of a class of 3-year-olds informed me that he had made a noose and tried to, well, set up some practical demonstrations with it. He came to me upset, and I asked him what's up, and he says another student wouldn't be his friend. I explained that not everyone wants to be friends, and that's okay. He said, "But I want it, and she should listen to me." They overwrote my Pokémon save file. My little cousin did this. I almost killed him. I flushed my mum's wedding ring down the toilet. She never got it back either. At age 15 or so, I was remanded to community service at a local low-income daycare for smoking doobies in the park. Justice is blind and dumb as hell. So, I'm on the fire escape smoking, and this kid who was small and had been getting bullied by a few others frickin' mercilessly sidles on over to the kid who bullies him the worst, who immediately starts moving away, when the small kid just whoops him like in Street Fight time. The smaller one then just walks over to the side, knocks his noggin on the wall a couple of times, starts crying, and goes to the teacher to tell her that Justin, the guy whose butt I just saw him kick, I never found out what happened to that kid, and to be honest, I don't want to.
Psychologists, therapists, counselors, etc. What are some things people tend to think are normal but should really be checked out? Disclaimer: this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please see a licensed professional for health advice and counseling. Hi, I'm a kid who fell through the cracks. Got diagnosed with dyscalculia when I was a sophomore in high school. Throughout the years, my parents would tell counselors, psychologists, etc. that something wasn't right, and it was more than me being bad at math. It took a really cool teacher I had pushing and advocating for me to get an official diagnosis before anyone did anything. I understand fully that sometimes parents can be a pain, but please, 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 if a kid is 15 or 16 years old and is stuck at a 5th grade math level, look into it. People normalize abusive behaviors by loved ones all the time. Being able to identify your own personal boundaries and then enforce them with others for your own well-being is, unfortunately, not innate. Therapist here. If you grew up with or currently are part of a family where the whole family has to work to keep one or more members of the family in a good mood or appeased, that's not healthy. People are in charge of their own feelings. It is not your job to appease others so that they can emotionally regulate themselves. Disassociating with friends. Current friend of mine is having real struggles emotionally and mentally. We're still talking, but he's been distancing himself from other people. We reach breakthroughs every now and again, but it's been difficult. Psychotherapist here. Some things I see regularly that could have been caught earlier before they became a problem: unhealthy coping mechanisms. For example, drinking to, quote, relax frequently or smoking a lot. Even something like promiscuity can be a red flag that a person is trying to avoid dealing with something stressful by distracting themselves. Self-harm. Hitting yourself, banging your head on things, burning yourself on purpose, cutting yourself, etc. All of those things indicate that it's time to talk with a professional. Quote-unquote normal child-teen behaviors that are not actually normal, like running away or getting into fights. Not communicating. When this happens, something is usually wrong. Not always, as some folks are quieter than others. But if a child, teen, or adult rarely speaks, or if they're silent in the presence of their parent or significant other, it's time to get them to see a professional alone to have their safety assessed. I've seen individuals who are literally shut down due to having been profoundly abused by the people they live with, and one of the main signs of that is silence. I've also seen people in perfectly good homes who cannot communicate due to extreme anxiety, and without professional help, it's hard for them to overcome this. Mood swings. When a person's moods change from one extreme to another fairly often or regularly, that is another concerning symptom. Sometimes they are considered eccentric or hormonal, but that sort of thing can be a sign of many problems from bipolar disorder to post-traumatic stress disorder. Self-sabotaging behavior can ruin your life quickly. If you have an event in your life that has affected you negatively and you seem to find yourself exhibiting irrational or incongruent behaviors, see a counselor. You don't have to have any certain pathology to seek mental wellness counseling. Thinking that 5 hours of sleep per night is okay. Rapid weight gain or loss with no obvious medical cause. Relationship problems. Don't get me freaking started. To clarify, what I really mean is that poor sleep is usually a symptom of something more serious like depression or anxiety. Our bodies are often not as well as hiding things as our minds are. I'm curious how much procrastinating and/or lack of motivation to do stuff is normal and how much isn't. From what my therapist told me, if you would simply rather be doing other stuff, that's perfectly normal. But if you absolutely could not bring yourself to do homework, there's something wrong. I used to have severe anxiety attacks about homework to the point where when I needed to do it, I'd either be completely drained and go to sleep, regardless of time of day, or have a huge breakdown. Executive dysfunction, the inability to do things that you know you need to do, is a major symptom of ADHD. Take a look into other symptoms and see if that might fit. See a doctor if your life is affected. I'm going to word this incorrectly, so bear with me if I say something inaccurate, but I have a fun fact for my therapist. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that deals with anxiety. It also deals with studying, but I'm not sure if it's the ability to force yourself to focus or if it's something else. Either way, the frontal lobe is important. It turns out that it's bad for your brain to be in a constant state of anxiety. So if you had a crappy childhood, like me, you're screwed because, as my therapist put it, the constant stress wrecks your frontal lobe. Which explains why it's almost impossible for me to study unless I'm cramming for an exam in a couple hours or starting to write a paper an hour before it's due. I can't activate the part of my brain necessary to focus on my task if I'm not in a state of panic. I don't know anything about how it ties into things like the fact that I keep my clothes strewn around until 10 minutes before a guest shows up, but I suspect it might be a similar thing. So I'd say that my major lack of motivation isn't normal, and it makes me wonder how much better I'd be in my classes if I'd had a normal childhood. There have been a lot of my patients who have been pretty surprised when I've told them, hey, that's anxiety or depression, when they just thought their behaviors were typical for everyone. Not being able to maintain friendships, constantly being nervous about the safety of your child to the point where you hate being alone with your child without your partner, not being able to motivate yourself to do things, especially things you once enjoyed, feeling excessively tired all the time, not being able to calm down and just thinking the same thoughts over and over without feeling worried. Other things we can help with. Having a hard time trusting others, trying to recover a relationship from infidelity, not knowing why your kid is misbehaving so much and needing guidance, helping to improve communication within your relationships. If you experience these things and more, therapists can help. Let us help you. Edited to add, I've noticed costs coming up in a lot of these replies. I hate that cost is such a barrier for people. Sometimes colleges offer free or discounted therapy from their students. When you're training to be a therapist, you spend at least 1 year working as a therapist while meeting with the supervisor each week to consult on your cases and get guidance on moving forward. My college unfortunately didn't offer discounted sessions, but I know many do. It might be worth checking out. Some systems also have charity care options for people with low incomes. That can be worth pursuing as well. To find a therapist, if you're in the US, you can call your insurance company and get a list of places that take your insurance. That's a good place to start. A good rule of thumb as to whether a behavior or symptom should be checked out is the same we use to determine a diagnosable disorder, if it causes impairment in one or more areas of life. The range of what's normal is huge, but if something keeps you from going to school or work, keeps you from maintaining basic hygiene, from maintaining your friendships, familiar relationships, or romantic relationships, it's causing impairment and you should seek help. Number 1. This is not an exhaustive criteria for diagnosable mental illness. There are many criteria that we consider in diagnosing, but the one criterion that is present for all is that it must cause impairment. Number 2. Enjoyment is also an important aspect of functioning. If you are getting by in your life but are miserable, get help. You don't have to live like that. Number 3. Serial killers and sociopaths represent a very small percentage of the population and rarely seek help willingly. This was not directed at them. Number 4. The areas of functioning I listed are general examples pulled from the Western culture where I live and was trained. Different cultures have different values and the norms of your culture should be taken into account. Number 5. If you are unbothered by your level of functioning in these areas relative to cultural expectations, good for you. Most people considering this advice likely have a sense that something is not where they want it to be in their life and are looking for confirmation that it's bad enough to seek help. If you're not concerned, my advice is not directed at you. Number 6. No one is saying that being content with having no interpersonal connections is inherently pathological. What if I'm very high functioning? Like, I make it to work every day and have a social life and I'm able to clean up after myself, but I have no purpose. I'm not actually interested in things. I just exist to pay my bills and smile for the audience. It's like I'm just staring at life's clock waiting for my time to be up. I feel like the world is ending, but it's not scary. I'm frustrated it's taking so long. I'm just tired of existing. Is this fine as long as I show up to work and do my laundry? Okay, wow. Y'all have told me to have kids, do drugs, see a therapist, go for a walk, make a friend, to stop being an attention grabber. This is great. Everybody has a freaking solution as usual. But so many of you feel this way, so I'm glad to know it's not just me. I attempted to end my life about 6 years ago. Back then, I could barely get out of bed or feed myself. I don't feel that way anymore, so I guess I thought maybe I still wasn't depressed, that I was finally over it. I took a big step a few days ago and saw a therapist, and I have another appointment scheduled. I didn't think this post would turn into what it is. It was a late night post where my thoughts burrowed out of my skull in a fit of abject despondency. Thanks for the kind words and the unkind words. I just hope you all have gotten something out of this. The attitudes of their parents. No, really. There are a lot of bad things that current parents do that are just seen as normal when they're not, and they have long-lasting psychological effects from emotional damage. Inability to regulate your emotions. Also, negative self-talk. We talk to ourselves way worse than any person could. Let me expand on this if you don't mind. Generally, your emotions should be like a calm river. No needless waves, no great sadness, anxiety, angry outburst, misplaced fear, but also no great ecstasy. All of these feelings have their place and will be experienced at one point or another, but your default state should be calm, like an EKG with an occasional spike. Similarly, when a negative spike happens, one should be able to manage it internally, ideally without the use of external substances, and in an adequate time, move past it. I think that's what we should all aim for, myself definitely included. Shadow people. One question we asked was if they ever saw, heard, or smelled anything others didn't. This came up more often than you might think. I drive trains, which is a career fraught with extensive sleep deprivation and random sleeping times. The company I work for now is really good about rest days each week, but I used to work for another company where I averaged 5 sleep cycles for every 7 days. Also, very stressful work environment between constantly having the company try to trick you into getting fired, or even just how easy it is to screw up and kill a whole town of people. So, shadow people is a common occurrence that we just get used to. They usually appear on the edge of your vision, right in front of you. Some guys will call them track people. They're standing or walking down the track just past your headlights. Just knowing about it makes it easier to just ignore your mind and trust your instincts. But being off duty and awake for 36 to 72 hours at a time gets weird. I start to hear a low murmur, like static or something mechanical. Or maybe a radio that is just barely out of tune in the next room, just loud enough to know you're hearing something. And things moving around in your periphery, like things that are really there, disappear and come back randomly. The need for some parents to speak with their children about adult problems. No, your young child does not need to be aware that you are struggling financially or that daddy slept with the lady next door. The parents that tell their children that they are going to go and speed my car into a tree purposely, off myself while you were at school, or slit my wrist when I showered tonight. And parents that they feel they need their children fixed as it's the child and not the family unit as a whole that needs support and or assistance. Just a few recent ones I've heard. In regards to financial comments, taken from a previous comment of mine as I've been getting asked to answer this, I'm talking more on the extreme side and towards children that have been extremely hurt and money talk was used as a tool to make the child feel at fault and guilt to some degree. I'm currently working with a child now that is triggered whenever he hears talk about finances and feels it's his fault they will eventually become homeless. They won't, but this is what he's told. If only he didn't eat so much, if only he didn't have so many school fees. Not to mention the arguing between carers over finances. This must be his fault too though, they're yelling and shouting because of this. I've seen a lot of people dismiss their depression and other mental illnesses because it's not that bad, or other people have it worse, or I can and should be able to handle it on my own. You shouldn't have to suffer through mental illness, even if you technically can. You deserve to be happy, and therapists and psychiatrists are there to help you learn how to help yourself. It's not a weakness to find someone who can assist you in figuring out coping skills or prescribe you medications to help fine-tune your brain's neurotransmitters. This post right here, this is what I've been saying. Some people just say, oh, I'll cope, or it's fine, when it's not. It's like they're not allowed to have a mental illness when in reality they're in survival mode and they can't register healthy emotions or mechanisms. It's like a post I read out before. If you're just existing, living day to day detached from everything and everyone, being constantly tired, or having persistent thoughts of death, that's not normal. And I get it. The American mental health care system sucks. It's not easy to get help, most of the time because it's financially unviable for them. But a lot of times, the people who need it the most won't ask for it. It's because they don't feel the need to. They don't want to bother anyone, or they think it's too difficult, or they have anxiety about making appointments. I don't mean to be pushy or ranty, but I sincerely hope anyone who needs a therapist watching this video gets the help they deserve, because people aren't all awful, especially not you. From the patient side, it took having a massive anxiety attack at my doctor's office to find out that no, massive anxiety attacks in front of strangers isn't common or normal. Research psychologist checking in, if your toddler is doing socially unusual behaviors such as not responding to name, not responding to a social smile, not pointing using gestures, using your hands and arms as if they were a tool or extension of the body, engaging in repetitive behaviors, not responding to your use of gaze to direct their attention to distal objects, check with a pediatrician about getting assessed for autism spectrum disorder. Perfectionism. While a spectrum and everyone wants to do good work, an obsession with perfection is not something to be proud of and definitely not healthy. Healthy work ethic is doing your best and then letting go, as in recognizing no matter how much effort you put in, the result is, to some extent, out of your control. And that's okay. The intent and effort counts more than the end result. If you get obsessed with the end result only, you will hurt yourself because you never have full control over your end result, but you do have full control over the intensity and dedication you will put in, even if that doesn't translate well. It is a fact of life sometimes things don't work out, so people who never, and I mean never, have anything less than flawless work all the time are paying for it somehow. Burnout or mental stress or overtime or medications and drugs to keep going or etc. It is pathological to want or to think you can realistically have such control that your work is flawless all the time. I'd like to point out that there are tons of things that are normal but are not healthy or ideal. Normal is just what the statistical majority are doing, not what would be best for them. I think the main question should be, what impact is blank having on my life and relationships, rather than wondering how it compares to the average person's experience or behaviors. Excellent point. One of the fundamental points of any successful therapy is aiding the patient in distinguishing whether a behavior is self-helping and or other society helping, or it is self-harming and or other society harming. Many harmful and even malicious thinking and behavior patterns are common, but are definitely unhealthy. Conversely, many greatly healthy and self-helping ways of thinking and behavior may be even actively discouraged by some people in society. See part about unhealthy things being common. So ultimately, anyone seeking a happy and successful life must learn to judge things from a functional perspective, and ultimately throw the loads of negativity and bullcrap that a good chunk of society will often try too hard to instill into your thinking out of the window. If you can learn how to do that on your own, great, good for you. But if you have trouble, by all means reach out. Never let yourself remain stuck. New nurse here. Did my rotation for mental health, and one patient in particular took quite an interest in me. He was very polite and very kind. He was chatting up a storm, answered everyone's questions, and repeatedly asked my name. Later, we got to look at patients' files, and I got his. He had a psychotic break and started hearing God. She told him her name was Courtney and that she had chosen him and he was to find her and marry her. Guess what my first name is? Courtney. They ended up moving me to another part of the hospital after that because he was quite interested. Can confirm, I am definitely not God. Way too much responsibility. Coping with stress in your relationships by walking away from conversations, saying you've had enough, or going silent. Coping with feelings of insecurity and anxiety by lashing out at your partner. Example, asking a bunch of questions about one of their acquaintances instead of saying, I feel insecure for these reasons, please talk through it with me. Been a couples therapist for 10 years, now clinical director of a private practice. So many more, but those are two of the most prevalent in couples work. Tech here, so bottom of the totem pole, but I'll offer my opinion. Normal is not the right qualifier in my opinion. Psychology isn't like physiology, where you can go in and they can run exploratory tests on you to find out you're sick in a way that hasn't manifested symptoms yet. That's why your doctor will screen you for certain common or devastating disorders. The way I learned about mental illness was the 4 Ds: dysfunction, deviation, distress, and danger. Dysfunction means it gets in the way of you doing your job, school, or whatever. Deviation means it's not something everyone is going through. Distress means you're not okay with it. Danger is self-explanatory. You come in with some or all of the 4 Ds, and we form a treatment based on a set of symptoms that you most closely match. Then we treat the symptoms. The point of all this is to say, mental illness exists on a spectrum where one end may be so subtle that it only informs a person's personality, whereas the other end is completely debilitating and can get a person killed. You may know someone with features of an illness. In fact, I'd be surprised if you didn't. But if they don't want or need treatment, then they shouldn't be diagnosed. The best example is autism. Someone high on the functionality side of autism will do quite well in life. In fact, it is actually quite fair to discuss if autistic people live better lives than their counterparts. The answer would be entirely based on what you value in a quote-unquote good life. The next group of people are objectively suffering from their condition. They may have a chemical imbalance in their brain that causes them to be more anxious or sad than their counterparts. However, if it doesn't have enough impact on that individual, then they may go their entire lives without really needing to be checked out. To answer your question, if someone feels like their life would benefit from the field of psychology, then they need to get checked out. The hurdle that professionals face is educating people on what kinds of things psychology can help with. That is just to say that many different extremes of certain traits can be a symptom. However, you do have to make sure it is abnormal for that person. Not everyone who doesn't like people is clinically isolative. Not everyone who has lots of intimacy with multiple partners is hypersexual, and not everyone who doesn't brush their teeth is depressed. It takes no time at all to learn the different symptoms of different disorders. The rest of the time at school will be spent finding how to tell if those traits are a symptom or just who that person is, and of course what to do about it. Often the question of why is important in mental illness. Not participating in something you used to love may be anhedonia, or you may have just lost interest. Your medical doctor should never have to ask you why you have swollen lymph nodes. Your therapist should absolutely ask why you want to get a divorce. He cheated on me is not a symptom, but he's not my husband anymore, he is an imposter that looks like my husband, but he is an Al-Qaeda spy sent to kill me is, most likely. Emotional regulation. I see typical kids that just can't handle anything. It's terrifying. They are going to have a very difficult journey ahead unless they seek help. Dismissing your own feelings, your own thoughts, and your own internal voice saying something isn't right because others around the world have it worse. Devaluing your thoughts and emotions is a quick path down to making them louder and more painful. Rage and anger outbursts. I'm shocked by how much bad behavior during an adult tantrum is written off with little or no concern. Oh, that's just how he gets when he gets mad. He'll calm down. No, adults should be able to regulate their anger and handle it appropriately. Everyone gets angry. That is totally normal. But we shouldn't find ourselves escalating so easily and responding in ways we later regret. Trauma reactions. They are very normal for the situation but are not healthy or easy to deal with without help. Our bodies and brains hoard survival responses, so I see a lot of people struggling with unhealthy coping skills or habits that at one point kept them safe and helped them survive. This can range from large mood swings, emotional or physical disassociation, difficulty connecting with one's physical or emotional being, and difficulty identifying triggers. I get a lot of childhood abuse survivors who have had issues in therapy before due to this. If your therapist goes in assuming you are able to connect with and name feelings, identify what is weighing on you, etc., they won't be very helpful. Also, my normal therapy PSA is, whenever possible, please don't wait. There is no such thing as an issue too small for therapy, but waiting can cause something to morph into a way bigger issue. I know for a variety of reasons that isn't always feasible, but if you can, please do.
American teachers abroad. What is the craziest thing your students thought was true about Americans? When I was teaching in Spain, I introduced myself to the class and told them I'm from Miami. I hear a kid shout out in Spanish, "Wow, how is this guy alive?" CSI Miami, Dexter, Miami Vice, and Florida Man have really corrupted foreigners' views of my city. I was presenting an exhibition in Shanghai of about 95% Chinese people, and a young woman came up and asked me where I was from. I am white with brown hair and eyes. When I said I was American, she looked baffled and responded, "But don't all Americans have blue eyes?" A lot of people also think that all Americans are fat and tall. It's a bit more understandable when the person is old. An old man in Shanghai Park asked where I was from, and when I said the US, he hollered, "Then how are you so short? I'm just over 5'2". American in South Korea here. Have been asked by co-workers if high schools really have vending machines full of birth control pills. Also, if I know any cowboys, not the football team, and if I have a gun back home. Students ask me if I know Obama. Same kids yell, "Obama!" anytime they see a black person in their books or in a video. We're working on that. At my high school, I was the immigrant mediator who would teach newly arrived Russian and Ukrainian immigrants, and sometimes Jamaican and Haitian immigrants, English, and assimilate them into American society. This was in southern Brooklyn, where there were thousands of Russian immigrants coming in during the early 2000s every year. I was picked for the Russians mostly because I was from Chechnya and knew Russian. The biggest thing they would ask is how did they start with dealing drugs, joining gangs, and where is the nearest gun store. They came from places with atrocious crime, and often they were criminals, and they probably heard about America's drug and gang problems and thought they could make a better living doing that in America. They had watched movies like The Godfather, or even stuff like Menace II Society, and thought America was this badass outlaw land, when in reality their countries were a ton worse. Many of them came during the 2000s, during the early Putin era, when crime was dropping fast and it became harder to be a criminal in Russia. But many were shocked that NYC was not the crime-filled nation it was back in the 1980s and 1990s. Hi, welcome to Brooklyn. I'm Willmaster123. I'll be your immigrant mediator. Here's the steps to get your FID card and a list of local gun stores. Here's the common application to fill out for the Bloods, Crips, and all the other major gangs in the area. Here's the list of gangs who are hiring and positions they are trying to fill. As an immigrant myself, I would be wary of letting my handlers know that I intended to involve myself as a criminal in the country I was moving into. They asked me to explain what white trash meant, and then they got confused when I said that it didn't apply to black people. A friend of mine did a few years teaching in South Korea, and every new class he taught, there was always at least one kid who would ask him if he knew Leonardo DiCaprio. They were always so disappointed when he said no. When I was teaching English in Japan, I had a 15-year-old girl ask me if I saw everything in blue because my eyes are blue. I almost laughed, but she was dead serious, and everyone else looked at me expectantly while waiting for the answer. Not a specifically American stereotype, but similarly indicative of an insulated culture. Which actually reminds me, I also had an ethnically Japanese co-worker who had grown up in Las Vegas, but who also spoke Japanese. His students often refused to believe he was American. They thought it was some elaborate ruse. A guy I knew when I lived in Central America asked if there was time to get out of the way of the snow. Upon questioning, it turned out that he thought that snow fell all at once. Foomph, like a big blanket. Had some family come up from Mexico to visit for Christmas. It snowed and they all ran out to play in it, then quickly ran back inside. They were shocked at how cold it was, like they didn't think they needed gloves and jackets to have a snowball fight. My cousin said, "We knew it would be cold, but we didn't think it would be that cold." I got a few surprised looks when I told students we didn't sleep with our shoes on. Taught in Spain for a bit, I was asked multiple times what kind of machine gun I owned. I swear, if anyone else stereotypes us Americans as gun-toting hicks, I'm gonna take my M16 to their city and see what they call us then. First question was where I'm from. Detroit. Subsequent questions asked in no certain order. Do you have black friends? Have you shot someone? Do you own a gun? Yes, no, no. I'm skeptical. Real Americans are taken to Walmart at birth, where they're issued a firearm, a six-pack of Bud Light, and a Republican voter registration. Are you sure you're an American? An exchange student from Italy was disappointed when he came to Colorado and attacks by Native American tribes weren't a regular thing anymore. I was teaching elementary school in Seoul. The day's lesson was about asking people what they ate for various meals. Kimchi is eaten at every meal in Korea pretty much, and I asked one of the students if he gets tired of eating kimchi. He says, "It's okay. You don't get tired of eating hamburgers at every meal, right?" As a note, I am very thin. I'm trying to think of an actual equivalent for America, but I don't think anybody eats anything as frequently as Koreans eat kimchi. Other commenters sure have a lot of opinions on the matter, though 80% of them do appear to be either cheese, bread, or potatoes. My students seemed pretty shocked I didn't personally know Obama. Also, they call every black guy Obama and every black girl Beyoncé. Interesting that we now have multiple cases of this being a thing in foreign countries. First question asked was if I'd ever shot anybody, then asked if I owned a gun. Then they seemed skeptical that I was American at all. This is second-hand, but Mark Salzman's non-fiction book, partly about teaching in China in the 80s, Iron and Silk, had some doozies in it. A grown man asked him if the rumor he heard about America was true, that we had machines that did our work for us that looked like people, but occasionally went rogue and hurt people. I think someone heard about the Terminator and played telephone with it, is the only explanation I've got. Or perhaps Blade Runner. I teach in the Middle East, and one of my students was legitimately scared of gay people in America because he thought they were aggressive. Like they would pull you from a car and assault you aggressive. Just a lot of scary, weird misconceptions about gay people. When I was mentoring university students in Kyrgyzstan through the US Embassy Outreach Program, they thought The Bachelor was how we actually dated in the US. I taught high school English in France. Some sample questions from the students. How many donuts do you eat per week? How many celebrities have you met? They were under the impression that celebrities were just walking around all over the place and around every corner, in a country of 300 million. How many guns do you own? Do you really only drink from red cups at parties? Does everyone drive a big car, like a Hummer? How many times a day do you eat McDonald's? Why does everyone in America go to church? How many gangs are there in your city? The only cities in the US that actually mattered to them were New York, Las Vegas, and Miami. I worked in Korea for several years. Occasionally my work group would go out for pizza or steak dinners, or something like that. Several of them would admit to me that even after scarfing down an appetizer, a salad, a bowl of soup, a massive steak, 2 sides, and several glasses of beer, they would go home and have rice and kimchi, because they hadn't yet had a meal. Apparently, you are not a good Korean unless you have rice and kimchi at least 3 times a day. One of them would often bring me bread. Later, they would ask how the bread was. It started to seem like all our conversations revolved around bread. I asked one guy about this once. He said, "That's what foreigners always eat, right?" It seemed that they were inferring that since they had to eat rice and kimchi 3 times a day, there must be some American equivalent, and since Americans never eat rice, it must be bread. Minds were blown when I told them that I do sometimes eat rice at home, or potatoes, or bread, or pasta. I taught English in China for a while back when I was in high school. They thought all white guys could surf, shoot a gun, and walked around without a shirt. All white girls had huge chests and were very stupid. All black people were drug users. The European fascination with our use of red Solo cups as the sole way of imbibing never ceases to amuse me. I'm from Ireland, but I lived in Ohio for a year. I too found Solo cups and school buses an extreme novelty. I enjoyed the portion sizes too. I pay once and get 2 meals out of it. Mostly, the biggest thing I was taken back by was seeing American military vehicles and soldiers in person for the first time. I've traveled a lot and big into journalism, so I follow international relations and current affairs quite a bit. But it never dawned on me that I'd basically seen saturation coverage of American soldiers in films, video games, and on the news, Afghanistan, Iraq, but never in person. I kind of weirdly had a bit of a starstruck reaction when I saw soldiers at an airport or Humvees traveling between bases. Besides being asked if Americans shower with their shoes on in order to keep them clean enough to wear in the house, I've had to keep a straight face when a barely 5-foot skinny Japanese girl asks me if she seriously had a chance to be a big black rapper's hoe upon graduation if she went to college in the US. Other noteworthy ones were an adult student whose mind was blown when I told her that we have sewing needles. She thought they were a Japanese-only thing, and a kindergarten teacher who didn't know that cat's cradle string games were known outside of Japan. Studied abroad in Japan, and people were surprised that my English was so fluent. I'm a white Australian. Many of us in English-speaking countries would also attest that when a certain amount of Aussie slang is involved, it nearly becomes another language. No shame on the Japanese for thinking this. I'm in a small town in northern Italy, and my students are baffled by the fact that I don't go to church. I taught English in France for a year. One day, one of the kids made a comment about seeing me out running over the weekend. The kid sitting next to him goes, "Well, how did you see her if she lives in America?" The teacher was like, "Wait, what?" Turns out this one kid thought I flew home to the US every day. This was a 4th grader. I'm an American in Europe who TAs, and most things are from movies. Super unsafe, callous people, everyone has a gun, women sleep with anything that moves, etc. When I ask, say, a German if I should then base my opinions on how they are shown in movies, I get a look of horror followed by one of understanding my point. Wait, you mean all Germans aren't lederhosen-wearing, beer-drinking yodelers? No, that's Bavaria. It's the Texas of Germany. Not a teacher, but I'm from Tornado Alley, and a group of students in New Zealand ask me, "How do you get to school? Aren't there just tornadoes everywhere? It must be so scary." Apparently they thought that there are tornadoes everywhere all the time, and you just drive on the road like, "Oh look, there's 3 tornadoes out today." Not just an American thing, but one of my teachers was in the Peace Corps back in the day and went to the Philippines. She said that all the kids thought that snow grew on trees because the only snow they'd ever seen was in pictures. Women sleep with anything that moves. This is an American stereotype? I thought we were looked on as prudes in Europe. Ethiopian children didn't believe I was American because I'm not blonde. Black people are made of chocolate. I almost didn't want to correct them. They prefer the term delicious Americans. Introducing myself to my middle schoolers in France. "Where are you from?" "I'm American." But you are not fat?" I was asked, "Why is most of the world America?" Me, "Huh? What do you mean?" "You know, North America, South America, Central America, Latin America, United States of America." He was from a very small place in South America, so he scrounged up a world map and talked about it for a few hours. A kid asked where my gun was and if my horse was outside. One of the takeaways from the other stories seems to be just how many people outside of America think that GTA is a depiction of everyday American life. It's just so nice to see someone base their image off Red Dead Redemption instead. I work in the Middle East, and I got a lot of casual N-word dropping, I think because the students hear it in gangster movies and pop culture, and think it's just commonplace. They have no idea that it's even slightly taboo. I tried to argue one day, and a student pointed out that Snoop Dogg said it about someone else, so why can't he? Says something about our culture, I guess. I am not a teacher, however my brother is over in Germany. He told me that he went to a skate park and got thirsty, so walked to the snack bar area to get a water. My brother, "Hey, could I get a water please?" Snack guy hands him the water. No, here it's free. My brother, "I appreciate that, but I would like to pay." Snack guy, "No, it's free. See, I'm not a Nazi." My brother, "Oh no, I wasn't implying that you were." Long story short, apparently some German people think that they are all Nazis still. I taught a few English lessons in China while I was working there, and was surprised that only a few minutes into my first lesson, there was a widespread gasp when I began writing basic phrases on the board. Several hands shot up into the air immediately, and I quickly realized that everyone's question was how long it took me to train myself to write with my left hand. The average age in the class was probably 35, and all had thus come from a generation where they were forcibly taught to write with their right hands, even if they were natural lefties like myself. Not quite to the point of this thread, but it sure was interesting. My mother taught in Australia from 1979 to 1986. Her students found the way she pronounced things strange at times, but other than that, nothing weird. The students just accepted she was American like a lot of the people they saw on TV. She said the adults were worse. My mother is African American, so she had to deal with racists. My uncle called her a Negro until my father told him to stop. She also dealt with some guy on the street who called her a bloody Negro when he bumped her car with his car. My father was with her and instructed her on how to insult him, so she pokes her head out of the car and calls the guy an effing wog. Having an African American woman yell that at him caught him off guard, so he shut up and drove away. Also, a lot of the Australians my mother interacted with found her natural hair very, very interesting. I taught English in China for a summer. One of the Chinese teachers, a college graduate, told me that China is vastly more ethnically diverse than America because in America, you only have white people and black people. I wasn't teaching, but while traveling I was asked by some school kids from London to confirm that it's illegal to talk in elevators in the States, especially New York City. From New York, can confirm. Not a teacher, but did do volunteer work in a lot of other countries. How I disappointed people in various parts of the world. I did not know Britney Spears, Chile. I could not take them with me to adopt, Brazil. I was not fat or stupid, Germany. I could speak Spanish, Spain and Chile. No, I am not super easy and will not have adult fun times with you, Iraq. I don't own any guns and do in fact know my way around international politics, Netherlands. I'm actually an atheist, also Netherlands. Canadian in Japan. When I worked at junior high school, one of my co-workers thought all North Americans just don't eat fish, or rice, ever. At all. He was shocked when I told him I ate fish and rice all the time as a kid. I'm pretty sure he thought it was just an Asian thing. My sister went on exchange in Germany for a semester last year. Someone asked her if all Californians surfed to school. My kids here in Korea were shocked when I told them I couldn't remember my blood type, because pretty much everyone here knows theirs, and it's supposedly related to personality traits. I told them that blood type isn't really that important to Americans, and they didn't seem to believe it. While teaching 4th graders how to tell time, they told me that they go to bed anywhere between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., and they definitely didn't believe me when I said that 4th graders in America go to bed earlier than that. To them, I guess kids everywhere are sleep deprived. Also, a 3rd grader once asked me why I'm so dark. I'm mixed black and white. Not a teacher, but I had a friend in Germany while I took German. We exchanged papers and edited them for each other for our foreign language class. Apparently, her English teacher said that all American schools start at 9 in the morning. I lived in a rural area at the time where we started at 7:30. It took her a while to believe me. I taught in Mexico for a brief period of time. Here were a few of the odd misconceptions. My students couldn't believe that I grew up without a maid and that I had to work through high school and college. They thought that even the poorest people lived in nice houses and owned laptops, smartphones, nice cars, etc. They didn't seem to believe that food insecurity and extreme poverty existed in the US. Thanks to Hollywood's racist portrayal of black Americans, my students seemed to share the idea that most black Americans were gun-toting thugs. Some of them even said they would run the other way if they saw a black person walking down the street. None of them had ever seen or met a black person in their life. I did my best to convey that this was in no way true. Another weird thing was that my Mexican roommates would yell at me if I walked around our apartment barefoot. They told me that I would catch a cold by walking around without socks or shoes on. Apparently, my American friends were also told this by their host families and roommates. Been at my best friend's Mexican grandma's house quite a lot. Socks are required footwear at all times or else we'll die. I'm Russian. We'll get cold if I walk around without socks. We'll get cold feet with socks. I'm in Japan. Had an educated, middle-aged guy tell me he thought it was strange that we traditionally used pumpkins during Halloween. I asked him why he thought that. He goes, "It must be very expensive." I'm like, why? Because it must be expensive importing all those pumpkins from Japan. Dude thought all the world's pumpkins came from Japan. When I tried to convince him otherwise, he didn't believe me, until I asked him where he got his pumpkins. When he told me he got his from Yamanaka grocery store, I was like, we pick ours from the ground. He was still skeptical.
People who made an impulse decision when they found out Hawaii was going to be nuked. What did you do, and do you regret it? Apologies for the Hawaiian mispronunciation in advance. Currently in Kailua on the island of Oahu. When my wife and I got the message, we were in bed. She asked me to make scrambled eggs with sausage, toast, and avocado. So I went downstairs and made breakfast as fast and best I could. Gave my pup some too, because he's going to dine like a king if it's really his last meal. After the false alarm, we made an appointment at an ultrasound office to see our unborn daughter. Life is precious. I started off trying to wake up my roommates to no avail. Then, in extreme denial, I walked outside my home to see if everyone else was hysterically preparing for a disaster. There were crowds of people running to their cars from the beach, the freeway was completely blocked, and yet there were also elderly people who didn't get a notification just watering their lawn as if nothing was happening. After the 5 minutes outside, which felt like an hour, I walked back in to see my roommates awake, switching through channels and seeing a banner on every channel that warned us to seek shelter, stay to the floor, and stay away from windows. Then I received a frantic call from my mom, from California, in tears saying how much she loved me and then calling my dad and 2 sisters saying it could be the last time they might talk to me. My 12-year-old sister felt so rushed and says she loved me but didn't know what else to say. I could hear my other 6-year-old sister say, "How could Ryan be dying? There's no way." At this point, my biggest fear was no longer dying. It was the thought of my family I'm leaving behind. I told them how I live in an area with low population and away from military bases, and I should be fine with my water and food reserves. Mid-call, I receive an incoming call from my uncle who lives on the island. I figured he had important news that was relevant, so I told my family I had to hang up. He told me it was a false alarm, so I proceeded to tell everyone else. And that concluded my most stressful 30 minutes ever. My best friend is vacationing there. She crawled into bed with her 3- and 5-year-old daughters and held them while accepting that they were going to die. Her husband called from a fishing boat trip to say he loved them and wished he was with them. My grandma told us she bought MREs on Amazon when she got the alert. We had to actually explain to her how that wouldn't have helped. When I heard about it, my 12-year-old daughter called from a shelter at a basketball game she was cheering for. Neither my wife and I received any cell notification, so we looked at each other and decided that by this point, if something is coming, we don't have time to seek shelter, so just hope for the best and let the other kids sleep. I have a coworker that ran red lights, taking his family to a hospital basement for shelter where a woman was forced to give birth. 100% don't regret my approach to this. Personally, I slept through it. I woke up to the second, "lol, never mind," alert. Though my dad was down at the beach taking pictures, and he told me later that he fully intended to just stay there and hang out. My mom had thought her phone had a virus, so she didn't do anything.
807, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. 845, lol, never mind.
Hawaii resident here. While I did make the impulse decision, the people around me did. I was sleeping when the announcement came out, and the others in my house didn't decide to wake me up. They said, if I was gonna die, might as well let me die in my sleep. We all became tired of the news after 2 hours. It just became annoying. Cleared out the fridge and hid in it for 6 hours. Got the alert with 2% battery, so had no idea it was fake. Went to Honokohau to dive. Figured 100 feet underwater was as good a place as any. No boom. My dad lives in Molokai, population of 8,000 or so. I called him when I heard about it, asked him about it. He said, 1, he didn't think it was real anyway. 2, a nuke from North Korea would be small and aimed at one of the population centers, Oahu, Maui, Big Island, and would not kill him. And 3, if 1 and 2 were wrong, he couldn't do much to stop it. He just had breakfast on the lanai like usual. Side note, for mainlanders, a lanai is a deck and lanai is another island. I ate all the leftover lasagna in my fridge. I figured that if crap's about to hit the fan, I better carb the heck up. I texted my mother, "I need to tell you I love you. In case everything goes wrong, please tell everyone I love them and I've had a wonderful life. I'm very happy." She called me in a panic and I told her I loved her. She asked me if I was going to leave and I told her I was going to stay with my husband no matter what. I ended the call because I didn't want her to hear me die if it did happen. Then I kissed my husband and we held each other on the couch. It was a good day. My wife and I had just sat down to eat at Cafe 100 in Hilo on the Big Island when we all got the alert. I don't know if it's because we were both first responders or what, but we just continued eating while trying to check the internet to see if it was real. I know it said not a drill, but it was just so, surreal? The owner sent his employees home and sat with us. I remember thinking that this is an island, there's no place to go, and I already paid for this meal, dang it. I got on the emergency services scanner for the island and heard someone confirm it wasn't real, about 15 minutes before the actual alert went to everyone, so that was good. I'm just mad that the first place the government went to confirm it was false was freaking Twitter. We had next to no internet connection because everyone was jamming the signal, and Twitter is terrible anyway. Why not send an all clear on the phones ASAP? It was 8:07 a.m. and I was sitting in my hotel room in Waikiki browsing Reddit, saw the alert, and immediately turned on the news and started going to Twitter. I didn't hear any sirens. No news. It was eerie enough to question, so I went outside my door and saw people yelling and people calling loved ones. I was glad I stayed calm, but hotel staff was running out of the building and the lobby was a crap show for about 20 minutes. From my point of view, the locals seemed scared it was their home and livelihood. I was on an island 2,395 miles away from home, so if I was gonna die, at least there was nice weather. My friend who goes to college on the island said campus was an absolute crap show. All I regret is filling my emergency water containers right behind the car. So now I'm blocked in the garage by 150 gallons of water. I felt like this alert showed me that I can keep calm and that I'm a bit apathetic towards death, and I'm pretty proud of myself. I got drunk for the first time in 4 years of sobriety. Oops. I made an impulse decision to stay in bed with my wife. Nowhere to go for safety, no time to get there anyway. Might as well be comfortable in my bed with someone I love. My 70-year-old dad ate 2 loaves of bread while hiding in his closet. He said he only regrets it because he has to buy more bread now. This man was gonna die crammed full of bread. I can't stop laughing. Well, I don't live in Hawaii, but as someone who's planning for some of this stuff, I'd caution against just resigning yourself to die. Depending on a lot of different factors, you could easily survive. A woman survived Hiroshima 300 meters from the hypocenter of the blast because she was in a sturdy building. The man sitting on the steps outside became a shadow on the pavement. The typical yield you could expect to hit a counter-value target like a city is below 1 megaton, probably closer to the range of 150 to 300 kilotons. If you don't live downtown, the likely center of the target, and are at least 2 miles from the hypocenter, then you stand at least a 50% chance of surviving, which goes up exponentially if you take even basic steps to survive, like hiding in a windowless room. There are so many different factors to consider. Is the weapon set for ground detonation or airburst? If airburst, what altitude? What direction is the wind blowing? Fission versus fusion ratio, local geography and proximity, and so many others. Point is, don't give up. You can make it. I never would have expected motivational advice from someone who's a doomsday prepper. I regret not calling my parents. I was in total denial mode and only called my fiance to ask if he got the alert too. He was working at Honolulu Airport, where the scene was more chaotic. He didn't think he'd ever see me again. I'm including details on how the airports were. All the flights were grounded. He was at H&L at the time, and passengers started walking off the aircraft. The captain eventually deplaned everyone. Security and TSA were as clueless as everyone, and couldn't direct anyone to shelter because there really isn't one. Some people ran out the terminal, presumably to get to their cars and drive home. I was at Hilo Airport at the time, but some tourists were huddled together, praying and/or crying. We managed to get our car before all the rental stands closed up. He also said at Kona, TSA allowed all passengers through to seek shelter inside. Not sure where though because it's open air. When the all clear came through, all passengers had to exit and be rescreened, causing massive flight delays. I was in the living room changing my 2-month-old son's diaper. My wife was in the bedroom sleeping in. I hear the alarm go off on my phone a couple feet away and just think, oh, it's just one of those Amber Alerts, and go back to changing his diaper. A second later, my wife comes up running out of the bedroom screaming that we were going to die. I kind of froze up. All I could think about was how helpless I felt and how I couldn't do anything to save my newborn son. My wife was running around the house grabbing diapers and formula for the baby, and I was just slowly finishing changing his diaper because I couldn't imagine that something like this could happen. After about 2 to 3 minutes, I sort of snapped back to reality and focused only on getting my son and wife to some sort of safety. I live in a relatively small beach house with very thin walls, so I knew it wouldn't do anything, but I told my wife we would be safest in the bathroom in the middle of our house. It really wasn't an impulse decision, but throughout the whole thing, I didn't even think to call or text any of my family on the mainland. If you had asked me what I would do if put in this situation, I would say I would call my parents and tell them I love them, but I didn't even think of that. I just thought about how much I love my wife and son, and how sad I was that I wouldn't be able to see who he would become when he grows up. This has really given me a completely different perspective on life, and makes me sad that I didn't even think to say goodbye to my family back home. TLDR, I didn't think to call anyone back home and could only think about my wife and newborn son. It's funny how he phrases this as if it's something he regrets, but honestly, he should be glad that his first instinct was being with the people he cared about the most who were with him. Reading this next one, I can only think of a movie like Shaun of the Dead. In the chaos of figuring out where to seek shelter, we ended up deciding to go to the hospital that my wife works at. She's a nurse. figuring we could maybe help out with the flood of people that will be coming to the hospital with injuries. We have about 20 minutes from the time an alert is received until the missile hits. We were up against that limit when I pulled into a parking spot I found on the street. My wife grabbed my son and ran for the hospital. I grabbed some change and started paying the parking meter. My wife turned back and yelled, "What are you doing?" I yelled back, "We have to pay the meter. Even if the world is going to end, we're not savages." We didn't get a parking ticket, so no regrets. I was in a hostel, and I'm a male, and all of the other people in the hostel room I was in were women the same age as me. We all got the text at once and looked at each other. I knew what I had to do. Awkwardly comfort them with jokes while they cried. Not very romantic. Had an impulse panic attack. 195 out of 100 wouldn't recommend. Sorry, is 195 out of 100 your rating or your blood pressure? I was at a laundromat and my wife called me all panicked after receiving an alert on her iPhone. I told her that it was probably a mistake because I didn't receive it on my Samsung phone and that it must be a technical glitch or something. Also, it seemed like there should have been sirens, emergency news broadcasts, and a full-on national or military notice rather than just a notice to iOS users. In hindsight, I was right and seemed like Joe Cool, but I now feel like I should have reacted more and taken it seriously. I don't want the last moments of my life to be me saying, "It's probably nothing." I was a dismissive jerk to my wife who was genuinely freaking terrified, and I regret that. I was at work here on Maui. My wife was at home with the kids and I called them to calm them down. Once I realized they were all together, I went to the third floor of a building with some coworkers and waited for the big bang or whatever was to come. I told my big Samoan boss that we should just hug. This way they would find us frozen in time like the folks they found in Pompeii after Mount Vesuvius. Things were a little awkward the rest of the day. Rolled out of bed and told my boyfriend, well, how about I make us one last cup of coffee before we die? And proceeded to the kitchen to brew a small pot. All I wanted was one last time to do one of my favorite things. Sit and talk stories with him with coffee and cigarettes in the morning. Maybe it wasn't so impulsive, but there was something about it being the last time to ever do that. My uncle and his family live in Hawaii. He's been cheating on his wife for 2 years. We all found out about it in a mass text he sent 5 minutes after the emergency text went out. He wanted to clear the air before he died. I imagine that family reunion didn't go quite well. Late to respond here, but I'll throw mine in. I work at a huge tourist location on Oahu. Pretty quickly after the alert went out, we started herding all of our guests into large buses and moving them to a huge World War II bunker we have on property. In the middle of directing guests on where to go, I realized I hadn't clocked in yet and decided that if I was going to die in a thermonuclear detonation, I might as well be getting paid for it. I clocked in, then hopped a small bus with a few of my friends and workmates and headed toward the bunker. Once we got there, we decided that we really didn't want to die in a concrete cave surrounded by people we really didn't like. So we just kept driving to the other side of the property and hung out in the back of a big valley for a few hours. So, I guess the impulsive thing I did was purposely avoid shelter and instead go somewhere beautiful? I told my girlfriend not to worry about it and go back to sleep. Her mom called her not even a minute later, crying, telling her to wake up and that she was rushing home now. She thought I wasn't scared, but if it were real, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it, so I just wanted her to be in my arms for our last moments. I live pretty close to a town center, so for me, I looked at my girlfriend and said, "I love you and I hope it's fast." Sat in bed with her looking at pictures of our trip we took to Big Island and just was with her. The weirdest part is basically just living today. Yesterday, I fully accepted I was gonna die, so it's weird having to just live with the idea that I didn't. It's good, mate. You've seen the worst, and now you can take stock of what is really important and adjust your life accordingly. I have a favorite cup that I use all the time. One day, I will drop it and it will break. This is the inevitable end for a cup, but I will still be devastated that it broke. I will curse myself for not being more careful as I pick up the pieces. But if I accept now that the cup is already broken, then every moment with it is precious. This is some master Oogway levels of philosophy right here. I swallowed a bunch of popcorn seeds. I thought it'd be really funny if people found a bunch of popcorn around my burned body. I came out on social media. I don't completely regret it, but I definitely lost some friends, and a lot of my relationships with my friends have become really awkward. Hi everyone, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being so kind. I can't believe I got this many responses. I promise I'm doing fine. I have some really good friends who are helping me get through this. I had some idea of who were the friends that I'd thought I might lose before I came out, but even though I expected it, it still kind of hurt. Thanks everyone for the comfort and advice. Luckily, the only bomb that dropped that morning was in my bathroom, and it too took 40 minutes to clear. On a more serious note, I realized only last night that I kept my sanity intact due to dumb luck. For me, it was because I took the kids out late the night before, and we were all home, all together. After digesting the stories of my friends and family, I realized that if my children had been at school or away with their mom, or if we had been driving in the middle of Maui somewhere, I'm pretty sure I would have absolutely lost it. I woke my 2 young girls and told them we were making a fort in my walk-in closet, the only room with no windows. From there, it was a surreal 10 minutes where I grabbed everything I could think of that would be helpful. Water, juice, granola bars, blankets, shoes, tablets for the kids. At one point, I mentally decided I needed to stop gathering items from rooms with glass windows and retreat into the closet. At that point, I just put on my game face with the girls and furiously tried to find out what I could with my phone. I exchanged a few texts with loved ones and took a call from my ex, making sure I had heard. I realized now that I was spared a lot of mental trauma because I had my family with me. I was doing the best I could for them, and basically, I didn't have to make a lot of hard decisions. I read a lot about the anguish of separated family, about those at soccer games, shopping at farmers markets, and those who had no idea what to do with those who they needed to protect, and those who they wanted to but couldn't contact. I'm glad my girls and I were spared the visuals of the panic. Later, I went to a sunset party which had a newfound vigor as friends embraced each other a bit harder and half-joked, "I'm glad you're alive." I was in my living room sitting next to my husband and sleeping 2-month-old. Saw the alert on my phone, we grabbed the baby and his pacifier and went and sat in the bathroom. I started calling people who work on base to see if they knew anything. My husband was checking Twitter, saw something about it being fake, went back out into the living room to check the local news. Saw the alert there, went back to the bathroom. The siren started going off, and I got there holding my 2-month-old baby, crying, thinking we were going to die, and I had no way to protect him. Got the false alarm message, and husband took the baby back out to the living room while I cried for a while longer in the bathroom. So, no major impulse decision, just a what the heck do I do, and cool, the best option I could think of in this moment is to sit in the freaking bathroom. I live near Pearl Harbor. I think the sirens I heard were coming from there. Either that or Hickam. My boss lives there and heard them too. I only heard them for about 5 seconds. Also, as for hiding in the bathroom, it is the only room in our house with no windows. Although pretty sure where I live it wouldn't have mattered. We would have been dead. Also, my husband and I grew up in the Midwest, so for tornadoes or severe thunderstorms, we would always either sit in the basement or bathroom. We don't have a basement here in Hawaii, so the bathroom it was. Also convenient for, the nervous craps and all. I woke up to people calling me about the alert, looked at my phone and read the message. I started searching the internet for answers, and there was zero coverage, which made me even more scared because I thought it was some kind of government conspiracy to not let the rest of the world know what was happening. I go to the Hawaii subreddit, and everyone is saying that they got the alert, but no info on whether the threat is real. Thinking about my life, I started to feel content with my inevitable death. Then I imagined my last moments slowly burning in intense pain, and that thought was followed by a minor anxiety attack and involuntary shaking for the next 30 minutes. I was hiding out at home with my best friend, decided to hold her hand and tell her I had feelings for her considering we were going to die and all. She didn't feel the same way. It's awkward now, and I'm worried for my friendship with her now. This didn't happen to me, but my friend, who is currently visiting his grandfather on the Big Island. He told me that right after he received the first alert to seek immediate shelter, he went down a couple homes to where the Clintons were staying to ask the Secret Service guys what was going on. Apparently, they were all in gas masks and ready to go. My friend, before receiving the false alarm alert, said he made a mimosa, said goodbye to his family, and planned to go sit on the beach to watch, as he described it, the fireworks. Wait, the Clintons? I regret telling our children what we thought was happening. My oldest child is 7. We explained it very simply with as little detail as we could, but geez. We told him a bomb was on the way from North Korea. We told him about the missile defense systems that all we could do was hope that they worked. We took away a lot of his innocence, and he's really shook up still. Afterwards, we told him about Mattis and how he's so smart and helps run the military to keep us safe. We couldn't think of anything comforting to say about the president, so my husband told him cool stories he's read about Mattis. My younger child is autistic and was just mad that the plans changed again. He was annoyed that the missile didn't come and didn't understand that the message was a mistake. He felt better when we went back to our original plan to hit the beach. I'm stationed on a nuclear sub in Pearl Harbor. I was on watch when it happened in the engine room. We had the whole duty chain of command in the reactor control room, and they told us they were going to evacuate all unnecessary personnel. We emergency closed the shielded volume of the reactor compartment so that we could get everyone off of the sub and into a floating support vessel docked near the ship. In hindsight, we should have just got all of the sailors into the reactor compartment and dogged the hatch. We'd have a pretty strong pressure barrier, and it has probably the best shield for a nuclear blast in the closest vicinity. It's sufficient to keep the crew from getting exposed to excessive amounts of radiation while the reactor is critical. Shields work both ways, so probably best to hug the shutdown reactor as opposed to getting vaporized topside. This will probably get buried, but I woke up at about 7:30 on Saturday morning to go check out some garage sales. I recently went through a tough breakup with my girlfriend of a year and a half, and I thought it'd be a nice way to stay busy and keep my mind off things. So I sat up in bed, took a huge rip off my dab pen, and hopped in the car to make my way down the mountain into town on the Big Island. About a mile down the road, my podcast stopped playing and my phone started blaring. I picked it up and read the message on the screen. Incoming missile. Take shelter immediately. This is not a drill. I rubbed my eyes and I couldn't believe the words that I was reading. I read them again and again before I pulled over, and as I was making a U-turn, I noticed everyone in their cars looking up from their phones with looks of horror on their faces. I'll probably never forget that. When I got in the door, I called my ex-girlfriend who was working at the Four Seasons, where she said people were losing their mind. I told her I loved her and how sorry I was for everything. She asked if her roommates could come to my house if they needed, and I said of course. Then she said she had to get back to work, and I begged her to leave if we got any more info. After we hung up, I went out to my back porch and looked to Oahu, and that's when I started hearing jet engine noise. It was getting louder, and I was running around to see if it was an airplane. Never did see a plane. I was terrified. No other way to put it. Last night we spent the night together for the first time in 10 days. She slept in my arms while I silently just laid there in the dark. Didn't sleep all night long because I missed that feeling so much. I didn't want to waste it by closing my eyes and passing out. I know we aren't going to get back together. It was a messed up day. This mistake shouldn't be swept under the rug. I feel like it was a very personal violation of public trust and people need to be fired at the very least. I hope no one ever has to go through that kind of fear and uncertainty ever again. I've heard stories of people I know who were sitting in bathtubs with their kids hysterically crying, people abandoning their cars and running on foot with their families. I want whoever is in charge of civil defense and the person who hit that button to be fired on the spot. Forget them. It's unacceptable.
Firefighters. What's the dumbest person you had to save in a stupid situation? I once had a firefighter tell me that he almost died in a house fire while going back into the house to look for the owner. A neighbor was concerned about why the firefighter was still in the residence, so he asked another firefighter. This is about how the exchange went. Neighbor: why is that fireman still in the house? Firefighter: he's looking for the owner of the home. He's right over there with the video camera. Turns out, the owner did not think it was important to alert the fire department he was out of the house. Instead, he was just taking a video of the whole event. The fire started because the owner had tried to smother his barbecue cooker flame with leftover wood from the siding that had been installed on his home. The owner did not realize it would burned his whole house down. Dummy tried to cross a 300-foot span of raging river in 0-degree weather on a snowmobile, and the machine was recovered days later. I'm not a firefighter, but I used to do a lot of disaster response work. Hurricane Floyd, eastern North Carolina. I had a farmer with a large family that refused to evacuate his house. Stubborn idiot. River had broke loose, floodwaters were coming up fast, and the police had given up on changing his mind. I drove my truck right up into his yard, rolled down the window, and asked him to dress his kids in something orange or bright yellow. He asked me why, and I said, so body recovery will be able to distinguish them from all the dead pigs floating around. He told me to F off, but 5 minutes later he had the whole family in the vehicle, and they got the heck out. The first hurricane I worked was Fran back in '96. Fran was bad, with heavy wind damage, roads closed, trees down everywhere, cars crushed, and power lines down for weeks. Floyd taught me that flooding is a hell of a lot worse. The devastation from flooding was far worse than anything Fran did. And the pigs. God, took a week to get the smell of rotting pigs out of my clothes. I couldn't eat ham for a good 3 years after Floyd. We needed to close the main connection through a forest over the winter because the trees were falling faster on the road than we could remove them due to way too much snow falling. Also, the redirection was more than an hour longer due to the snow. Some cars thought they would come through, but turned around as soon as they saw the trees on the road. One semi also thought he'd get through. He drove up to the trees and called the fire brigade and complained why we didn't remove the trees. As he was calling, a bunch of trees behind him also fell, locking him in. It stood there 1 month before the trees and the snow could get removed by us, so that at least the semi could back out. We needed another month until the road was free again. Former firefighter/EMT. Easily the dumbest person I encountered was a mother of 4 who decided it would be an awesome idea to get a Facebook/Instagram-worthy picture of her kids, all under age 10, sitting in a rowboat. Mother untied it from the dock and thought she'd just pull them back with the rope that she forgot to hold on to. They floated half a mile down the river before the 2 oldest boys managed to grab a branch hanging over the bank. It was really surreal to see 4 young kids, all in matching clothing, sitting in a boat waiting to be rescued. I have no idea what happened after, but they were physically fine. Just scared, a little tired, but the mum was in full-blown panic mode and kept getting in our way. I hope she's making better choices now. I was called to her home to get a pie out of the oven before it caught fire. The lady went to the store and was delayed for some reason. She called 911 to have the fire department take the pie out of the oven and place it on the stove. The call came in as, something stuck in the oven and unable to turn off stove. Still the #1 call in 32 years. Need to get a pie out of the oven? How about someone to put out the embers in your fireplace? Ring 911 for our personal home chore service today. Years ago, we had this call straight out of Caddyshack. Some guy had gotten tired of this gopher ruining his yard. Little did he know, though, he was facing the Sun Tzu of gophers. The homeowner, dwelling upon his experience from Vietnam, decided that the best way to deal with the gopher was to treat the situation like a Viet Cong tunnel. In lieu of a frag grenade, he poured a 5-gallon can of gasoline down the gopher hole, waited with a varmint gun, and lit it off. The ensuing explosion caused a small crater to form in his yard. I'm still thoroughly impressed that there was proper fuel-to-air ratio in the network of tunnels that allowed for such an explosion to happen. However, the gopher refused to surrender without a fight. The gopher ran out of the hole, engulfed in flames, causing the guy's yard to catch fire. The gopher sprinted into the guy's shed, still on fire, and burrowed into a void space in the wall, where he died. Like the AmITheA perk from Modern Warfare, his still flaming remains set the inside of the wall on fire, as well as several flammables. In the end, the guy's backyard was ruined and about a quarter of his shed burned down, taking out a bunch of power tools and a 0-turn mower. He definitely would have saved a few $1,000s if he had hired an exterminator. I'm not the firefighter, but my brother's wife at the time was. There was this massive structure fire at a barn in town that drew out nearly every truck in the general area, like 3 towns worth of firefighters trying to get this thing under control. During all of this, there was some lady who continuously called 911 asking over and over again, "What's going on at the farm up the road?" According to her, this woman would have to be a complete moron not to realize what was going on, as the fire could be seen for miles. Fast forward later into the night, and one of the ambulances on scene suddenly leaves. Obviously not normal for this sort of situation, but there isn't much time to question it. Fast forward still, and as things are finally starting to calm down and are under control, one of the volunteers on the original ambulance comes over in his own car and shuffles sheepishly over to her and the chief of their department. He tells them that there is a woman a little ways down the road who called the ambulance, hence why they left, and requires a lift assist, but absolutely refuses to let the EMTs do it. No, it has to be a firefighter. My brother's wife, seeing that the other departments have things under control, goes with the man to see what's up. Apparently it's the same woman who had called 911 over and over again, and when they arrive, she is laying on the floor absolutely wailing. EMTs say they can't find anything wrong from what they've been able to do, but with her requested firefighter, they are finally able to get this woman up. They start asking her what happened, hoping she might be more willing to share with my brother's wife there, and she says, "I was just feeling a little ignored. I figured this would get your attention." Grown woman just laid herself on the floor, called for help, insisted on the firefighter when there was no need, all because the barn fire was getting way more attention than she was, and the 911 operators wouldn't give her the gossip about what was going on. I know she got in major trouble for abusing 911, but from what I hear from the people on both fire and ambulance, she has made a habit of calling for help whenever she feels she is not getting enough attention. I was a Navy corpsman, so this one is probably a bit of a reach, but whatever. Marine comes to sick call with seriously beaten up eggplant, like lacerations, bruising. Thing was really messed up. Asked him what he did, and he insisted that what happened was that he had a surprise boner and it hit his zipped up pants zipper and basically went all garbage disposal on his junk. Dude would not drop this narrative no matter how many times we told him that this just doesn't happen. Finally, Doc, the actual MD, comes in and tells him enough of this crap, yada yada, writes him up for malingering, need the full story. Dude jammed his wiener into the back of a computer tower. According to him, there was an opening back there, probably because old PC towers in the Navy routinely had stuff swapped out and they didn't always cover openings when things were removed. So, because he was an effing donkey, he stuck his finger in it and felt a light tingling sensation as his skin made contact with something electrical. So he took the next logical step and whipped out his eggplant and shoved it in the back of his computer. What he did not account for was that the opening had sharp metal edges. But once inside, he got that tingling feeling, so he felt like he might as well finish the job before he pulled out. Plus, and this is where I had to stop myself from laughing, he felt it was smarter to pull himself out flaccid rather than hard. Taps forehead. This was not a young man. This was not a man without rank. The men and women in charge of the defense force of your shores, America, sleep soundly at night knowing that there is no threat they won't investigate from every possible orifice. Angle. Two I can recall, one specific. The specific one was a young girl around teenage years who decided those toddler swings with the seat you stick your legs through like a little basket so the kids can't fall out was made for a teenage girl. She got stuck and lost blood flow to her legs. We had to cut her down and get her to the hospital to have it safely removed due to it basically becoming a tourniquet on both her legs. The other is general, but it's people who didn't wear a seatbelt and the people they killed as a result. You have less control of a vehicle when you're not being held in place, so those wrecks are more common as the first sign of trouble your butt moves in the seat and reduces your ability to control the vehicle. You also become a projectile. If you're lucky, you only kill yourself. If you're not, you wind up bouncing around and killing a passenger. Also, the leading cause of partial ejections and re-entry to vehicles since nothing was holding them to the seats. So many times I could have just been there cutting someone out of a seat and them being barely beat up, but instead they had been scalped and died, or hit their kid, or spouse, or family member, or friend, and killed them. One in particular I remember was a large man not wearing a seatbelt in an overturned truck. He woke up while we were working on him cutting the passenger side up to get down to him as the vehicle was on its side, driver side down. He kept asking us how his son was. At first, we didn't get it. Then we realized he was laying on his 15 to 16-year-old son, and due to the man's size, we didn't see him. The son was wearing a seatbelt, but he died because his father smashed into him and smothered him to death while we worked, rather than just wear a seatbelt extender so his seatbelt fit. Also, don't lie to us about if you wore it. Your seatbelt won't fire the pretensioners if they are not engaged in the slot. They are designed that way. There is a circuit that is completed by the belt being clicked in place, which is also how your car knows your passengers are wearing a seatbelt or not, and sets off that obnoxious alarm. There is also a sensor in the passenger front seat of most modern vehicles to detect the weight of a small person, which is why your sodas or pizzas, or whatever, set off the alarm. Just wear the gosh darn seatbelt and don't lie. If you were wearing it, I won't be able to pull tons of slack on it when I arrive. Guess what goes in the report as the determining factor your insurance sees as to if you should have your medical covered as a result of the accident? Yep, I don't know what they do with the information, but I have to write that on the report. It wasn't really his fault, but we had an old guy in a nursing home get his balls stuck in a shower chair. This is my dad's story, not mine, but I've heard it so many times I think I can accurately tell it here. My dad was on the Boston Fire Department for a little over 35 years. For 13 of those years, he worked at a fire station in Dorchester. In Dorchester, there is a zoo, the Franklin Park Zoo. One morning in late September, they get a call to the Franklin Park Zoo for a young girl mauled by a gorilla. This is the sort of call they'd get all the time. Gorilla jumps at the glass, kid gets scared, parents panic and call 911. So they hop in the truck and ride on over. It's one of those kind of foggy fall mornings as they walk into the zoo. A couple of the other firefighters start walking into the zoo as my dad notices a man sitting on a bench holding a little girl in his arms. Assuming this is what the call is for, he walks over to the man. The little girl has a scrape on her forehead and she's crying, but is otherwise fine. The man looks like he just saw a ghost. So my dad asks the guy what's going on. The man just says, "Little Joe is out." My dad says, "What does that mean?" The man just repeats, "Little Joe is out." So my dad says, "Who the F is Little Joe?" Little Joe is a 500-pound adolescent male silverback gorilla, loose in the streets of Boston. It's right about now my dad realizes that he's not exactly qualified to handle a gorilla. But he doesn't know who to call, so he calls everyone. 2 minutes later, the fire chief shows up, not knowing what the call was about yet, and jumps out of his car saying, Mark, is this about an effing gorilla?" My dad says, "Yeah, but how did you hear that?" The chief says, "He's standing at the bus stop on Seaver Street." Now the SWAT team shows up, hats on backwards, M16s in hand, and my dad, being the smart ass he is, looks at the sergeant and says, "Hey, I don't think this thing is armed." He caught a bit of flack for that later on. Animal Control and the SWAT team worked together to take down Little Joe. It took 14 tranquilizer darts before he finally went unconscious. Little Joe is still alive and well at the Franklin Park Zoo. The gorilla had clearly seen the film Madagascar and was attempting to emulate the animal's escape and waiting for the bus. I think we can all feel a little better knowing it didn't get gunned down by a SWAT team. A motorist had a bad alternator and the car died while they were driving. The electric lock control stopped working. We were dispatched for a person trapped in a motor vehicle. On arrival, the advice was to manually lift the lock knob. You can easily tell the ones who will not survive the first 24 hours of the zombie apocalypse. Reading your story reminds me of one of mine. Called to a lockout. Get to the location and am met with, "We just need a jump start," and think, "Okay, wrong call." Get out the cables and ask them to pop the hood. "Oh, we can't. We're locked out." Driver is holding keys in hand. Passenger window is down. I start backing away, assuming some kind of theft scam. They actually thought they were locked out because the key fob wasn't unlocking the door. It turns out the fob battery had died. Showed them how to use the key after checking ID against the registration retrieved through the open window. Vehicle battery was not dead. Firefighter/paramedic in suburb of Phoenix. Had to transport a guy to the ER because he was constipated. His wife tried to dig it out with a wooden spoon. Spoon got stuck and hurt to move it. Walked in and there's a 250-pound man, butt naked, lying on his side with a huge wooden spoon stuck halfway up his butt. My dad was witness to someone being stupid and rescued by a firefighter. My dad worked for IBM's AS400, a mainframe system, tech support division for over 10 years, 1992 to 2003. A customer called in because he needed to run a report and send it out to the networked printer. For whatever reason, the report was failing to generate and the guy on the phone was freaking out because some corporate bigwig demanded that this report be printed and on his desk by 3 p.m. Just another day at work. About 10 minutes into the call, my dad starts to hear this strange, high-pitched noise in the background. Dad, if you don't mind my asking, what's that noise in the background? Caller, oh, that's the fire alarm. Fire alarm? Yeah, the building is on fire. Far be it from me to tell you what to do, but shouldn't you get out of there? Dan, you don't understand. I have to get this report printed. Now, are you going to help me or not? So they continue to troubleshoot the issue. A few minutes after that, my dad hears shouting in the background. Dad, there seems to be a lot of yelling in the background. Is everything okay? Caller, yeah, it's fine. It's just the firefighters evacuating the building. Shouldn't you have to get out of there too? Dan, I absolutely have to get this report printed. Are you going to help me? I'm not sure that I should. We pay our support contract. I have to get this printed, and you have to help me. It's almost 3 p.m. It's just a report. I don't think it's worth risking your life. The caller starts to get furious when the shouting in the background gets much louder. A firefighter has come over to the guy on the phone and starts barking orders at him to get out of the building. The caller tells the firefighter, "Look, I have to print this report before 3 p.m. and I can't leave until it's printed." Over the phone, my dad hears the firefighter scream, "I don't give a damn about your goddamn report. The building is on fire. Now move!" There is a scuffling noise and the phone handset on the other end drops to the ground as the firefighter physically drags the caller away. After that, all Dad could hear was the sound of the fire alarm and various crackling noises. Needless to say, the report did not get printed by 3 p.m. New job interview question. Would you be willing to stay in a burning building to print a report? I've gotten the impression that Americans take their jobs too seriously, or at the very least, their employers expect them to. Would you be willing to work extra time without overpay if necessary? In a minimum wage job interview. Had a drunk guy in Antarctica chase a penguin. Penguin stuck his beak through the offending drunk guy's calf. He got sent home, and a report on international treaty breach wound up on some Congress member's desk. Oh, McMurdo, how I miss thee. Is anyone else surprised at the fighting potential of penguins? Now I think about it, an emperor penguin is about the size of a hobbit, and I generally assume that any animal bigger than a medium dog can outfight me. Obligatory clarification that I'm not a firefighter, but I was working with them that day. So back in my harbour master days, the town would have a 4th of July fireworks display every year. They would bring in a barge with something like 2,000 big old mortars on it. We, along with the Coast Guard, State Environmental Police, and a few local cops with boats, would set up a stay-back area around the barge for the show. Nothing serious ever happened, so we generally sat around with the best seats in the house. So we were all sitting around there celebrating our independence by annihilating as much of the sky as the town budget would allow. About 2/3 of the way through, I noticed a small fire on the front of the barge, so I give everyone a heads up on the radio. From a distance, we see one of the crew run across the barge vomiting projectiles into the sky with a fire extinguisher in his hand. About the same time as he arrives, the fire flares up big time. The guy just throws the fire extinguisher into said fire and starts running back to where apparently they had a protected area. Before he makes it back, there is a massive flare-up explosion. Everybody hits their lights and starts hauling butt to get to the crew. We were the second ones to arrive, and one of the assistant HMs is yelling at the crew to get off the barge. There are dozens of fireworks going off, and you can feel an intense heat every single time. Balls of fire just flying every which way. The crew is refusing to leave, and one guy is yelling at my coworker that they can't because all of their belongings were on the front of the barge, where the fireworks were exploding in their tubes. The look on my guy's face was priceless. He just reaches up and starts pulling people down into his boat. I think by the time he grabbed the second guy, they all got the message and started jumping in. We all speed out of there ASAP. Somehow the only injuries were minor from them jumping into the boat, though I did hear that one of the Coast Guard boats won itself a nice hole in the roof. I never actually saw it. We then make a call to the tugboat that brought the barge to turn its water cannon on the thing. We got a big negatory from them on that one, as they weren't going anywhere near the thing. The next option was to call the volunteer fire department. The problem was that they didn't have a fireboat, just trucks. So the possibly inebriated firemen need to commandeer the local 3-car ferry and use that to get their truck to the barge. It took them about 30 minutes to get there and foam the thing down. It was a pretty funny sight watching them trundle on by, having a laugh about being on a ferry. We actually had to bring in the freaking bomb squad from the local large city, but they couldn't make it till the next day. When we finally got the report, the fire was caused by, you guessed it, all of the crew's belongings, which were apparently sitting next to the mortars and not with them behind the barrier. The kicker was all of the company's insurance and licenses, etc. were with their stuff, so they were all gone too. Just all-round fun in small-town America.
Doctors of Reddit, what is the most stupid thing a patient has said trying to correct you? I asked a patient complaining of dizziness if she had ever been diagnosed with vertigo. The daughter chimed in and said, No, she's a Libra. I then laughed hysterically at her awesome joke. She was dead serious. Patient comes in with abdominal pain. I think it's my gallbladder, they say. Looking over their chart, I see their gallbladder was removed 20 years ago, so that is impossible. I mention this, to which they reply, yeah, but it grew back. Yes, I know there are a number of other things it could have been. A retained stone crossed my mind, but after 20 years, I found this unlikely. She also had this scar to vouch for the surgery. There was definitely a psychosocial element to the case. I took care of a child that got chickenpox. The mother was strongly anti-vax, but was yelling at me, how can modern medicine not have a treatment for chickenpox? She couldn't grasp the concept that we do, she just refused it for her child. Sir, I need to know why you stopped taking your antiretrovirals for your HIV. Well, I met this witch online that… Wait, did you say witch? Yeah, she sent me a bunch of herbs every month to cure my HIV, and they worked. Last time I checked, I was cured. Where and what test did you do to know you were cured? I made an online test that the witch told me to. There were a lot of random questions, but in the end, it said that I was free of HIV. Okay, we will need to do a blood test to confirm that. Now, can you tell me which herbs you were consuming? I don't know the name, but I have them right here. He points at his backpack. May I take a look? Sure. I opened the bag and what I saw was nothing but grinded oregano with something that smelled like chlorine. The patient sadly died from a severe sepsis a month later with a highly resistant microorganism, just because a witch in a website told him to stop taking his meds. A mother brought her 14-year-old daughter to the ER due to hypogastric pain and spotting. We asked the daughter when was her last period. She said 2 months ago. We asked her for her sexual history, thinking this might be an ectopic pregnancy. The mother kept butting in, saying that she is still a virgin and she has no boyfriend. We left it at that until her mother went out to go to the bathroom. The patient admitted that she had sexual intercourse with a classmate of hers. We requested for pregnancy test and HCG titers. It really looks like ectopic pregnancy. We advised the mother that her daughter needs immediate surgical intervention. She refused to believe us, saying that the lab results are unreliable and untrue. She keeps on saying that her daughter is a virgin. She stormed out of the ER with her daughter that looks really in pain. I had a patient once with family members who were some of the most frustrating people I've ever dealt with. The patient was morbidly obese and had open sores and wounds in all her skin folds. Cleaning her when she was first admitted was like some sort of disgusting clown car. We found a floral pillowcase shoved under one fold, and what we think was a smashed bread crust in a fold near her groin. Anyway, because of her weight, she wasn't a candidate for surgery, and therefore there was nothing our team could do for her. I think about 5 or 6 different meetings were held with her family to discuss her prognosis. Her daughter told the attending physician he didn't know what he was talking about, and that she had been this sick before and pulled through. Her pH was so low, it just read as below 6.8. And her blood pressure was a solid 60/25, despite every vasopressor under the sun running at 3 times the max doses. When the charge nurse pointed out her blood pressure on the monitor, the daughter said, "Psh, I've seen lower." When she finally died, her family was livid that we didn't save her. We coded her for 20 minutes, and they told us we should have continued for at least an hour. I felt terrible that her last days were spent in such torture, all because her family was in such denial about her condition. Had a patient with atrial fibrillation that needed to be on anticoagulation. I chose Pradaxa and the patient said, no, that one doesn't have any antidote. In fact, it's the only new oral anticoagulant that has an approved reversal agent. Patient refused to believe me, like I got some bonus for killing her or something. 1-year-old hospitalized with ingestion of unknown drug. No immediate signs or symptoms. Mother says it's heroin from her brother's stash. Urine comes back positive for meth. Mom gets very angry and defensive and tells us it's just heroin and we should stop accusing her of having meth. Like, lady, why do you think letting your toddler try heroin is so much nobler? Another one I remembered back from my GP days out in the middle of nowhere. Lady comes in with itching of the scalp. I look at her head and she has matted, greasy, extremely dirty hair that actually smelled. I've seen a lot of dirty people, but it was really something else. She wanted medication. I suggested she wash and comb her hair regularly for a few days and see if it would get better. She said, "And what if I wash my hair and it doesn't get better?" Well, I'm sure you can accumulate the filth again in 10 years or something, so it's not a permanent loss. Lady comes in with shortness of breath. We check her troponin levels. They're elevated. "Ma'am, you're having a heart attack." "No, I'm not." Yes, you are." "No, I'm not." Her PCP came into the ER and fired her as his patient. She signed an against medical advice and left. She died the next day of a freaking heart attack. Yeah. I introduced myself to a patient as doctor, your anesthetist. Patient said that I could not be a doctor as anesthetists aren't doctors. Not long after, another patient asked me if I had to go to uni to be an anesthetist, and still another asked me if I had to know as much as a pharmacist. The number of patients I have seen who are acutely unwell because they stop their medication does my head in. Almost always, the reason they stop the medication is because the condition they were taking it for went away, as a result of the medication. Shaking my head. Totally irrelevant, but I kind of think anesthetists are rad. The only time anyone has been able to hit one of my veins first time with no waggling around on my arm was when I had to be knocked out. Everyone else struggles to get my veins, even when I'm hydrated. Fasting for surgery and no liquids, still got a first shot. I was impressed. Also, I have pet rats, and anesthesia is risky AF for them. And not only is my rat vet's head nurse, small animal anesthetist rad as heck, but every time my rats have had surgery, they've gone well and recovered from the anesthesia well. And I guess I just appreciate that no anesthetists have done me any wrong. Oh my gosh. Y'all don't get enough credit. Ophthalmologist here. Told patient he needed reading glasses, which he didn't believe. I explained that everyone develops presbyopia eventually. Come on, George Clooney doesn't wear reading glasses. A, yes he does, and B, not sure why you're comparing yourself with him. This one's so petty but kind of funny. Had a female patient. Her mom asked me to adjust her scrotum. Trying not to burst out laughing, I said, "Your daughter's scrotum?" She acted like I was stupid and pointed to the back of her neck. I knew she wouldn't listen, as she was so convinced till I stopped arguing with her. And I also wanted her to go around saying it to other people. Med student, but a patient was telling me about how a doctor suggested she may have shingles of the eye, trying to get me to laugh at the other doctor because apparently shingles of the eye is a ridiculous concept. You can totally get shingles in your eye though. The time I was telling the family that the patient is going to die and her lab results, pH 6.6, lactic acid 25, are not compatible with life, and they said that they were pretty sure she would wake up if I put ice in her underpants. Well, yeah, we are not going to do that. She died and they still didn't believe me she was dead. They kept trying to wake her up. "I didn't have a heart attack. I had a myocardial infarction." That's what a heart attack is, chief. 20-year-old girl and her fiancé find out that she's pregnant. Me, partway through taking her history. "Do you smoke cigarettes?" "Yeah, about a pack a day." "You should definitely stop that." "Well, my sister told me that if I stopped smoking, the baby would go into withdrawal and die." "What?" PSA, don't smoke if you're pregnant or planning on becoming pregnant. It's never too late to quit. Had a patient come into the ED for what was essentially a cold. Kept requesting antibiotics. Kept explaining that they wouldn't help her viral symptoms. But I did then sit down and give her a basic tutorial on the differences between bacteria and viruses and antibiotics and antivirals. Hopefully it was enough to help her in medical school finals the next week. The worst part is, I can't tell if this post is joking or not. I'm a doctor, but this was my nana, not a patient. She was drinking 11 cups of coffee a day, which is too much. We held an intervention while visiting for dinner, and when we told her she was addicted, she responded, No, the coffee is good for me. It helps me with my shaking. She cut down once we explained to her what drug withdrawal was. I work in a burn ICU, which is a weird little specialty, but the number of patients and visitors that come in knowing absolutely everything is annoying as heck. Mayonnaise, mustard, and butter are not acceptable burn treatments. Leave the condiments in the fridge. I do not appreciate having to scrub 3 jars of mayo off grandma. I had an incredibly sick patient with large burns and ARDS, a serious respiratory complication that makes it very difficult to oxygenate someone, even with maximum settings on the ventilator and continuous medication to open up the lungs. He was then put in a rotating bed that we bolt patients into and rotate them face down. He was also on continuous dialysis from sudden kidney failure. Anyway, So patient, incredibly sick, had 10 to 12 IV bags going at once. Just a general mess of a person. Here comes the family member with medical experience. These are the worst. They always end up being a transcriptionist or a nursing assistant at a nursing home or something, but they enjoy coming in and trying to run the show. Some highlights from said medical expert before I kicked her out of the unit. "Why aren't you paying attention to his brain waves?" Yes, she yelled everything. She was pointing to the display on the ventilator, which has everything to do with breathing and nothing to do with the brain. "Why isn't he on propropanol? It's negligent to not have him on propropanol." She meant propofol. Think Michael Jackson. But he was on ketamine and Versed because those worked like a charm for him, and propofol was having some unwarranted effects on him earlier. "The dressings are dirty. You need to change them immediately." Okay, go away right now. One, it takes at least an hour or so to change a full body dressing while they're on the rotating bed, and the patient was so sick that if we rotated him face down to face up to get the dressings on his front, the fluid shifting in his lungs would have likely killed him. Also, burned dressings get gross quickly. I was super irritated by the time I kicked her out. Never kicked anyone else out since, but geez, she was annoying. When I was a medical student, this middle-aged male patient from a rural area got it in his head that I knew absolutely nothing, and he was doing me a service teaching and talking to me. He was in colorectal clinic for something unrelated and started telling me about the gland on the back of his neck that would drain every so often. When he saw that I was unfamiliar with this particular gland, he gave me this knowing look, laughed, and started instructing me, the dumb little medical student, about this gland. Apparently everybody has this gland for the immune system, but that his would drain when he was stressed. No, sir, I was being polite, but you have a nasty abscess on the back of your neck. I was hoping that the patient would try to explain this medical wonder to my attending when he came in, but alas, he didn't. Med student here, but I have had 2 winners. When discussing a precancerous skin lesion on a patient, they opted to use their laser ray instead of classic treatment. It was a cancer laser ray that was bought online. It also apparently had frequencies for arthritis. They insisted that the vibratory frequency can be tuned to destroy cancer cells, just like a trained singer may be able to use her voice to break a crystal glass. The patient did not believe that cancer cells and regular cells would have the same frequency. Another patient insisted that his cancer had been properly treated at home with baking soda. He gave me a website like pH Kills Cancer or something. The patient also had with them a surgery report in which it appears their baking soda consumption resulted in buildup of abnormal calcium in the wall of the stomach, which had to be removed. Veterinarian here. The anti-vax movement has been slowly seeping into my profession for years, but in my area it's gotten much worse recently. Almost every day now I have a client inform me on how toxic vaccines are and that I should talk to their dog's breeder because he or she is very informed. Most of the time I'm able to convince them that this is incorrect. However, some are still quite resistant. Vaccinating for rabies is not just a suggestion, it is the law, and my clinic has a policy that we don't let any of our healthy animals be vaccine-free. I've had a few clients walk out over this policy. I feel bad for their animals. These are the same kinds of clients that won't use flea and tick prevention on their obviously flea-infested dog, but will use lemongrass and peppermint instead. Spoiler, it doesn't work. Mom of baby. I don't vaccinate, it's against my religion. Oh really? Just out of curiosity, what religion is that? I'm Catholic. Not really a correction per se, but it made me laugh a lot. I've had a few patients express dissatisfaction that their Botox only lasted 3 months, and they suspected that I was diluting the Botox. Both statements are absolutely true and consistent. Why are you looking at my hip? I said the pain was in my knee. The hip bone's connected to the leg bone bone's connected to the foot bone. Woman with this weird abdominal cramping, twitching presentation. I won't say stupid because she probably had some kind of undiagnosed dementia, but definitely the most bizarre. Ask her what she's feeling, why she's twitching her abdomen. It's like it's trying to get out. Like what's trying to get out, ma'am? My sperm. Ma'am, you don't have sperm. Oh. For those of you curious, by the time I saw her, last official diagnosis was pseudo-seizures. She had a tendency to start twitching parts of her body whenever we would start asking whether she had twitching in those areas. Ma'am, have you had any twitching in your legs? She looks at leg. Leg starts twitching. Yeah, I have. Woman with breast cancer. She was in the medical field too, so I'm unsure why she said the things she did. Perhaps she was still in denial? I don't know. Anyhow, so I was the intern when she came in for a chest tube insertion to drain her pleural effusion. It was obviously suspected to be malignant. After the procedure, I went home and the resident on call had to deal with multiple calls from the distraught staff in her ward, for reasons I shall explain below. The next morning I was told by said resident, sporting a haggard appearance and bloodshot eyes from a busy shift, that she was my problem now. With that, the poor man left for home. I go in to see her and first get accosted by ward staff, who tell me she legit refused all pain meds, right after procedure, which entailed a tube scratching against her parietal pleura. Ow. So I go in and am told by this woman who, let me remind you, was employed in the healthcare sector that the tube had been pushed in far too much and is stabbing her, and that I need to undo the stitch and pull it out a few centimeters. No lady, I'm not authorized to do that. The x-ray was fine, no intervention was necessary. I tell her she needs to take her meds if she wants the pain to get better, and she says, no joke, that pain meds will further spread the cancer and that I should know that being a student of medicine. And she further said, look, no need to tell anybody, you're a doctor, use your own judgment and pull the tube out. She was adamant. My professor was going to be late that day, and I obviously wasn't going to do anything without his permission. I documented her refusal and went on my way. She left by the afternoon against medical advice. I feel bad for her, but she wasn't letting me help, so yeah. Doctor here. One we commonly get is, I know my body. Scoped a guy with knee pain. The joint looked perfect. Told him after the surgery, and he told us, no, my tendons are all torn. I know my body. Told a lady she was pregnant. No, I'm not. I just had a big lunch. I know my body. Absolutely, when something doesn't feel right and your doctor doesn't want to listen, seek a second opinion. You know how your body normally feels. But if someone has performed an invasive surgery to look at your joint or has seen a fetus on ultrasound, they probably know what they're talking about. Probably the legions of women that seemingly don't know how long it can take for an IUD to work and want it taken out because it didn't instantly stop their periods within a month. Also the women that came in with chlamydia but deny having had intimacy. Like, come on, I'm not your boyfriend. You don't need to lie to me. Implying that she would if you were her boyfriend? I feel like that's something that would need to be talked about. Woman had a bad yeast infection. Besides that smell, I also smelled feces. I asked if she wiped back to front. She said, yeah, but that's not why I have this. It's from drinking pop. Despite my assurances that it was not from drinking pop, she wouldn't believe me. I said, okay, you must be right. I'm just a doctor, and prescribed her the same thing I would have if she was an intelligent person. Gynecologist here. Imagine a revved up version of that dreadlocked beanie-wearing woman meme. It's not vagina anymore. It's pronounced vagina now.
Oh, yes, your vagina is looking very lovely today.
Your blood pressure is very, very high. You need to take the blood pressure medications I prescribed you. I don't need no pills, doc. All I need is Jesus. Well, you're about to be seeing Jesus very soon if you don't take your medication. Radiographer here, and the ED doctor gave me a request for soft tissue neck x-rays, and the doctor was pretty much like, don't question it, just do it. Anyway, after that patient had left the ED, doctor came in and told me that the gentleman presented to ED at 3 a.m. because he had hot milk 3 days ago and his tongue has been hurting ever since. The patient basically burnt his tongue, but was insisting on an x-ray to ensure nothing is wrong. Paramedic student here. Not the most stupid thing I've encountered, but the most common stupid thing. Do you have any pain anywhere else? Nah, all good. Then what do you take this specific medication for? Oh, that's for my back pain. Or, any past medical history? Nah. Ever been to hospital? Nah. Have you had a heart attack before? Yeah, how do you know? Has a massive personal medication bag with cardiac meds. While I am a doctor, this happened to my wife, also a doctor. Female patient came in complaining of infertility, said she and her partner had been trying to conceive for like 5 years and had tried everything. At one point she let the pronoun slip, she and I, and my wife said, wait, let's back up a minute. Turns out the woman had been in a hetero relationship for a few years and never got pregnant despite using no protection. She then entered a same-sex relationship and again never got pregnant even though she really wanted to, leading her to believe she was infertile. When my wife tried to explain that conception requires sperm, sourced from a male, as well as an egg, the patient was incredulous and exclaimed that she didn't need a man in my life and she didn't feel like being judged. Perhaps needless to say, the patient was lost to follow-up. When I was about 16, I went to the hospital with sharp pain in the lower right-hand side of my abdomen. It seemed pretty serious, so both my parents were with me, which was unusual because they're divorced. A doctor looked at my symptoms and said it looked like appendicitis. I groaned. I don't have an appendix, it was taken out. My parents said, yes you do. When I was 6, I had surgery to correct testicular torsion. I kept both my testicles. My parents politely told people I had my appendix taken out to explain why I was in the hospital. I accepted this as the actual reason for my surgery, so years later when I learned the location of the appendix, I assumed they did some kind of laparoscopic surgery through my scrotum to explain the scar there. I was very surprised to learn I do, in fact, have an appendix. The pain turned out to be from a sharp piece of chicken bone. All the ones I can remember follow the same theme. Patient misunderstands the difference between correlation and causality. The most striking example was a young man who was dying of AIDS. Doc, I was never sick a day in my life until y'all started giving me all these meds. Well, sir, while you still had a functional immune system, you didn't need these meds. HIV is a treatable illness these days if you actually take the drugs. If you believe the drugs are the problem and not the virus, well, you can still die from it very quickly. Variations on that theme are very common, unfortunately. I'm a family practitioner, and I had a family not want to vaccinate their newborn because they heard that vaccines were derived from monkeys' brains, and they didn't want their child to develop monkey-like characteristics. All I can think about is what kind of TV show would George in the Jungle be like if that were the plot. I'm a registered dietitian/nutritionist. I was counseling a patient who was morbidly obese, diabetic, and had severe peripheral neuropathy. He was also a chiropractor who had a hard-on for homeopathic remedies. I couldn't get out a full sentence without this guy trying to tell me that a dilution of whatever the heck would do the exact same thing. Finally, I just said, "Look, doctor, you need to cut the sugar and eat something in the vegetable family with every meal. You can drink whatever potions you want on top of that, but 30 years of drinking your distilled water has landed you here, in my office, with a broken pancreas and no feeling in your feet. So let's give this a serious try unless you want to take a chance with your flower remedies when the heart attack or stroke hits." Since a few people have asked, he got highly offended and filed a complaint with our VP of Patient Relations. I was ordered to do some bullcrap sensitivity training where I was told that I should have listened to his opinion on care and validated him as being heard. I was also told, by at least 3 non-clinicians, that since he was a chiropractor, I should have given more weight to his opinion since he was a licensed healthcare provider. I finished the training and promptly began looking for a new job. I can think of 2 cases. One involves family members instead of the patient. I had a patient who had a simple L4-S1 fusion. Did great postoperatively. Went home and hippie daughter introduced some allegedly probiotic therapy to speed healing, which actually introduced bacteria into the surgical site. 3 weeks later, we took him to the OR emergently to remove the hardware, and he spent 6 weeks in the hospital thanks to the massive staph infection introduced by a hippie. The other was a naturopath/witch doctor brought into our ED, initially unresponsive but regained consciousness. He had a ruptured MCA aneurysm. He insisted we try some alternative bullcrap to shrink the size of the bleed and heal it naturally before we would try the OR. His naturopath friend came in to do something while we took another patient to the OR. Went to convey the seriousness of the situation and he went unresponsive again, about 2 minutes after I left his ED room, to which we invoked an EM caveat and took him to the OR for definitive repair and clipping. He's now the naturopath who saved 5 lives thanks to organ donation.
What's the most MacGyver solution you've ever pulled in real life? I was in Germany in the US Army in the late 80s. We still had gasoline engine Dodge trucks. We were returning from a parts run from another base and our mechanical fuel pump failed. We emptied the window washer reservoir and filled it with gas. We carried spare fuel with us and connected the line to the inlet of the carburetor. We used the washer button to fill the float bowl of the carb anytime the engine started to sputter and had to pull over every 20 minutes or so to top off the washer reservoir. Took us a little longer to get home, but we made it. Once, a water main burst up the road from our house, and as we were downhill, all the water began to run through the side of our property and threatened to flood the entire house. I took the slide off my sister's playhouse and took it up the road and placed it on its side and propped it up, which diverted the water far enough onto the road that our house completely avoided the torrent. Sorry, neighbors further down the road. Something similar happened to me. When I was 15, we had a water pipe bust in the garage right over the door to the house. I shut off the water at the street and then proceeded to try and unlock the door and enter the house. Broke the key off in the door. Apparently, it was already unlocked, but swollen shut. I was already in the garage with duct tape, zip ties, and WD-40 well in reach. I grabbed our chainsaw and cut the door in half. Let's just say my mom was not as impressed as I was. The second water main story is less of a MacGyver story and more of a Kool-Aid Man entry. But you do you, Chainsaw Man. Me and my friend went to a ski slope in his old Skoda. 86 model, looked like a 60s car. It was cold that night, and after the skiing, the doors of the Skoda had all frozen. My friend fixed it by pulling the rubber seal off one of the windows, then he proceeded to pee through the gap by the window onto the locking mechanism inside the door so he could unlock it. Problem solved. I think MacGyver would have been way better if he peed on stuff in every episode. MacGyver, the Bear Grylls years. It wasn't me, but my captain. We were fishing near the Chesapeake Bay Tunnel Complex, and it began to get pretty rough, so we started heading in. About 5 minutes later, something obviously goes wrong with the engine. Investigation quickly shows the belt had snapped. The engine was a Chevy 350 small block from the 70s. It is getting rougher with each swells passing. As we hurry to don life vests, our fearless captain drops trow, removes his tighty-whities, and proceeds to make a belt out of the elastic band. 2 minutes later, we are steaming back to port, thanks to Captain Commando. On a San Francisco to Paris business flight about 10 years ago. 1 hour after takeoff or so, a flight attendant announces the AV system is down and the 400-plus passengers won't be able to watch any movies for the remaining 10 hours. The passengers suddenly look like someone just died in the plane. I don't care. I'm reading that really good book. After a couple of hours, I am getting tired of the book though, and well, since I am a video engineer, propose my services to the head steward to take a look at that video system of yours. The thing won't power up. Okay, it's rack-mounted. 4 screws off with a plastic knife, reseat it inside its rack, which is a little bent by using some folded cardboard, no power cord, it's power on contact, shake it a tad, screw it back in, push power button, ta-da! The thing is back to life. The steward announces to the whole plane the great news. I am a hero and get free champagne for the rest of the flight. I walk back under heavy applause to my seat, saluting my 3 clients seated a few rows behind me. I am the mother-flipping hero of Flight AF 480. The end. Just yesterday, I used a small rock, 12 inches in diameter, and a metal rod, heavy steel, 6 foot long, to move a 1,000-pound boulder using leverage. My family was about to start looking to hire a bobcat operator. They all thought I was some kind of wizard afterwards. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. Archimedes. My clutch failed in the middle of nowhere. Upon inspection, I discovered the slave cylinder had a leak. In my trunk, I had these items: electrical tape, window cleaner, water, zip ties, small socket set. I did not have any brake fluid, also used for hydraulic clutches. First, I wrapped the leaking line in a double layer of electrical tape. Then I lined up some zip ties along the patch and pulled them as tight as they would go with some pliers. Now, to figure out how to fill the fluid, I had the window cleaner spray bottle and some water. So I removed the sprayer part, stuck it in the water, and primed it out. Then I just sprayed that sucker like my life depended on it to get as much water as possible out of it. Subarus have their brake fluid reservoir right next to the clutch fluid. I inserted the tube into my brake fluid reservoir, thankfully full, and aimed the nozzle into the clutch reservoir and added enough fluid to get to the minimum level. A quick clutch bleed later, I was back in business. Note, this repair was made in desperation. As soon as I returned home, I replaced the hydraulic line and flushed the fluid. It's likely the tape fix didn't do much but may have helped to contain the fluid slightly. No patch is going to hold back the huge pressure in the line. Wow, I was coming here to impress everybody with the story about the time I had fixed a blown radiator hose with nothing but an empty beer can, but after reading your post, I think I'm going to keep my pathetic little exploits to myself. I would have probably just drank the cleaner fluid or licked the car battery. I probably would have just walked, crying, into oncoming traffic. If your car dies, you die. The narrator sympathizes with the comments of the less savvy amateur mechanics following the main story, and is right there with them. If I ever even have to fix so much as a busted tire, I hope everyone driving past me enjoys observing failure in its purest and most miserable form. When I would get into trouble as a youth of 14 or 15, my mum had a lockbox with a keypad entry system where she would keep my effects: Game Boy, phone, laptop, etc. One night while I was grounded, I collected dust from our grandfather clock and coated the keypad in it. I asked my mum if she could help me wash some grapes in the kitchen, then asked to use my phone to call a friend about a group project. The water on her fingers cleaned the dust off 4 numbers, and then it was just a matter of trying the different combinations to discover the code. Helping my buddy and his wife clean up their new place, there was an old padlock on a hasp that couldn't be removed in any convenient way. I determined that it was a pin tumbler lock. I asked him for a paperclip, and while they were making fun of me, I calmly broke the clip into 2 pieces, inserted one as a tension tool, then used the other to rake the pins above the shear line, and about 30 seconds later, pop! I had the lock open, tossed the lock to my buddy, and went outside for a smoke without even glancing at them. Bond. James Bond. Hotwired some antiquated phone jack in Serbia. Post-Bosnia War, pre-Serbia NATO bombings. And attached my 56K laptop modem to it so I could access Hungarian CompuServe internet to get news from the outside world whether my team of 10 foreigners needed to evacuate or not. This was 1998. I basically ripped off a weird wall plate and pulled a pair of twisted wires out of the wall, stripped them with my teeth, years of cheapskate car audio repair had prepared me for this, and twist-wired it to 2 of the 4 prongs in my pop-out phone jack on my PC MCIA modem. Connection speed was slow, probably 28.8 kilobytes per second. I basically checked my email back to my boss, whose boss was watching CNN 24/7, or so they assured me. We stayed for a couple more weeks. If I recall correctly, the crap only hit the fan in Serbia in 1999, but it was touch and go while we were there. The diciest part was figuring out with the house's owner how much I owed him for international calls. Exchange rates were changing like crazy, and I had a mix of Serbian dinars, Hungarian forint, US dollars, and Deutschmarks. I worked for a little company that created web shops for all the big companies in the area. One Wednesday, we were supposed to push a big update onto the live servers and thereby make a ton of new features available to the public. Only problem, there was a huge rainstorm on Tuesday night, a window broke, and the whole darn office was flooded. Almost all of the computers were completely toasted and none of the workers would dare go into the office. So I decided to wade through the water and built this Frankenstein's monster of a PC, with parts from the toasted computers. No PC case, just the bare components laying on top of a desk, while standing in knee-high water. I must have checked the electricity 20 times before finally turning the thing on, while sitting on the desk. We barely managed to push the update to the live servers. In conclusion, big flood in the office, built a Frankenstein's monster PC, saved the day. 1997. Me, broke, driving my date's 1988 Buick LeSabre on the Houston Beltway, taking her home around 1:30 a.m. Sound in engine compartment, engine light comes on. I drive for a little while longer, but it's apparent it's the battery as the lights start dimming. I pull over quickly then, knowing I have enough juice to start it again if I get fixed. It's the alternator belt, one of 3 belts. We were on the elevated portion of the 290 interchange, so a long walk to anywhere. And after a few minutes with 0 people coming by, I got my courage up and asked for my date's pantyhose. Yes, I tied the pantyhose into a belt where the alternator belt should be. I debated tying both legs into a thicker belt or remove one leg and keep that in reserve. I removed one leg of the pantyhose. Damn thing worked. We kept the headlights off for most of the way. We had to travel about 10 miles and the makeshift belt lasted about 9. Engine light comes on again, and this time I was going to burn the battery all the way down and make it the last mile. We did, but I guess the juice in the battery wouldn't have lasted another mile. We were married that December. She hasn't worn pantyhose since. And then one day the alternator belt on your current car snaps. You know, this wouldn't be a problem if someone still wore pantyhose. I was locked out of my house in the middle of the night. All I had was some wire, some outdoor furniture, and a garden hose. So I used the patio chair to smash the window. Your name really made this for me. Thank you, defenestrator. I have to admit that while writing this script in the middle of the night, the misdirect on this story got a hearty belly laugh that may have woken up my neighbors. When I was in the army, I was well known as the guy in the unit who knew about computers. This was 1993 or so, and I had a computer in my barracks room. Ran a BBS, actually, but hardly anyone else had much experience with anything more complicated than a TRS-80, if that. I was assigned to the battalion operations office, and we had a Zenith Heathkit 80286 machine that ran DOS, and was used to make Harvard graphics slides so that officers could brief other officers. It also had some kind of primitive RDM BS, Powerbase or something, I think. Anyway, one Saturday morning I got the CQ, charge of quarters, banging on my door. It's like 8 in the morning and I like to sleep in on a Saturday. The CQ says, "Captain wants to see you, Linz." And I'm like, what the frick did I do? Captain is the intel, not really in my chain of command or hierarchy. So I hustle my butt down to the operations office in my PT uniform, and Captain is sitting there, looking forlorn. He explains that the computer is locked with some kind of password, and he really needs to get into it so he can finish a presentation deck. I was confused because I didn't set a password, and hardly anyone else used the thing. I turned it on, and some kind of primitive BIOS computer password prompt comes up. So I pull out the manual. Going through it, it says that if the password is lost or forgotten, to send it to them and they'll reset it. I think to myself, they must have a simple way to do that doesn't involve replacing the entire board or doing something expensive. So I pull the case open and look around. I know some electronics and recognize the memory chip. This was long before DIMMs in a DIP socket. It's the only thing not soldered to the board except the CMOS battery. I go to grab the Sergeant Major's toolbox from his office. This is not a nice indoor set of tools. This is a paratrooper Color Sergeant Major's toolbox. It's crusty, nasty, and half the things in it are rusted and dirty. Everything's functional, but you wouldn't think about getting this stuff into a computer. I grab a pair of rusty old pliers, wipe them down to get the dirt off, and while this captain is practically losing his mind, he knows he'll have to pay for the computer if I break it, I yank that chip out, fire up the machine, and it works fine. No memory chip, no password needed. I was a fricking god after that. Me and two friends locked ourselves out of the house, looked through the letterbox and saw keys sat on a telephone table at the far end of the hallway. Rang locksmith. £100 to come out. Headed to the garage and found bamboo canes, duct tape, of course, and an Allen key. 5 minutes later, we have a 21-foot pole with a hook on the end. Fed it through the letterbox, hooked the keys, carefully lifted them through the letterbox. Danced. One time I was camping, and after firing up the grill, we realized that we did not have a spatula. As a solution, I shoved a beer can over the end of a stick and smashed it with a rock. It worked like a charm. Repaired a laser missile tracking system in Balochistan on a hot 130° Fahrenheit day with a Swiss Army knife, leather belt, wire coat hanger, and a pocket handkerchief. Damn circuit had shifted. Opened it up with the Swiss Army knife, used wire to jumper the melted connector, leather to insulate, handkerchief to tie it all up. Passed the launch test. Went back and fixed it with actual tools and spares the next day, but I felt like Angus all day. I was on a date once and I had a rusted 1974 Impala. I had to unstick the butterfly valve on the carburetor, so I used my mascara wand to unjam it. Wow, 4 marriage proposal comments answering this story today. Not too shabby. Sorry guys, getting married in 20 days from today. I understood maybe 10% of the words here and I'm still oddly turned on. I'm a straight woman and I swooned. I'm a lesbian and I doubly swooned. First at the 1974 Impala, then at her. Female watchers, we appear to have stumbled upon a surefire way to make everyone fall in love with you. Now go brush up on those mechanics. When I was 14, I went to visit my grandparents for a week, as I did every year. Being old, they didn't do all that much. Most evenings revolved around NYPD or Law & Order and eating pound cake with cherry ice cream. I don't like cherry ice cream. Anyway, they had one of those old-school cable boxes with the buttons and the knob and 3 rows of channels. Also, being old, my grandparents went to sleep by 11, leaving my pubescent and hormonal self to explore the house for, as I've always called it, jerk material. Fap material in the parlance of the times today. There was a Sears catalog that likely had my fingerprint on every page, along with other bodily markers and fluids. My imagination, I use that a lot, kids today don't realize, but we used to go around taking mental snapshots of every single female chest and piece of exposed flesh we could to store it up and use it later during our alone time. And of course, scrambled softcore adult flicks on channels my grandparents would never subscribe to. One night, frustrated by the lack of material to inspire my 5th stiffy of the day, I experimented with the cable box. And let me tell you, I hit proverbial gold. I found that if I pressed down 2 channels next to the scrambled channel and then fiddled with the tuning knob, I could almost get a clear picture with real girls that had real bazongas that were really exposed. Sure, sometimes it would get into a negative picture, and sometimes, right at the point of teenage euphoria, it would scramble really bad and I'd lose my stride and need to get started again. But it worked, and it worked well, and to this day I will never find success rigging something like I did with that cable box. I was the same way as a kid. I put so much effort into scrounging up spank material. As a horny adolescent back in the 90s, I didn't have internet or access to adult flicks, save for a lone Playboy that I wore out over the course of a few months. But I did have HBO and a VCR. I would figure out which movies had scenes of nudity and when they took place. Then I'd look to see if the movie was playing late at night, when everyone was asleep. I would set my alarm for when the movie played, sneak up to the living room and pop in a VHS tape and record whatever adult fun time scene I could find. I made sure to put it all the way toward the end of the tape so no one discovered the little compilations I was making. Never underestimate the resourcefulness of a horny 14-year-old boy. Without a doubt, we could probably get a group of 14-year-old boys together, say a dozen or so, deprive them of their own alone fun time for 2 weeks, and then tell them they can go to jerk to their heart's content after they build a bridge or cure cancer or something. Stuff would get done. Was backpacking and slipped down a cliff. I ripped my chest open pretty good and was about 2 days from medical. I had a basic sewing kit in my backpack and stitched myself up. The stitching held until I got back to civilization a couple of days later, and the doctors commented on how good my stitches were. Still have a big scar, but it is an awesome story. I actually held part of a submarine together with duct tape for an entire deployment. Seriously, not kidding. It wasn't the actual shaft itself, but there was a piece of it that broke and we didn't have the parts to repair it. Without those parts, the shaft itself would not be able to rotate without becoming irreparably damaged. So we used duct tape to rig it so the shaft could rotate freely, and then instituted a series of checks to make sure the rig, which was meant to prevent seawater leaking in, wouldn't leak too much. It did leak a lot, but we could just pump the bilge water overboard without a problem. Yes, I am American, and no, I will not say which submarine. I was like 17 and the school day had just ended. Everyone was in the parking lot getting ready to leave. A girl I liked couldn't get her car started, so I went over to try to help. I don't know much about cars, but I saw the battery had a lot of corrosion on the terminals, and when I popped open the battery, noticed it was pretty dry. There was a little kid nearby, so I gave him 50 cents and told him to go get me a Pepsi without giving a reason. I used some of the Pepsi to fill the battery cavities, and some to completely clean the terminals. The car started right up after that. It only took half a can, so I finished the rest. 'Cause, I was 17 and didn't realize that something that can do that to a battery might not be the best substance to ingest. Anyway, I'm pretty sure this is what led to my first post-high school job, designing airplane parts with her dad's company. I had a huge rock that was in my driveway, and it seemed like every year it would get pushed up a little bit more, to the point it was becoming a huge hazard. We had gotten estimates to jackhammer the thing, making the driveway passable, but they wanted between $800 to $1,000. I had remembered reading something about Hannibal's expeditions, where they would put hot coals on a large rock and then douse it with freezing water, and then smash it with a blunt object, fracturing those boulders and allowing Hannibal to continue his trek, and decided to try it. I took a bunch of charcoal and basically baked this huge rock for about 30 minutes, and then immediately threw a ton of ice water onto it, resulting in a loud pop. Then I hit the rock with a sledgehammer, and the rock exploded into a million pieces. I definitely got a kick out of putting some ancient science into application. A few years ago, my roommate, who wasn't on the lease, lost his job and bailed on me. Needless to say, this left me in dire straits. I got behind on bills and the electricity was promptly turned off. Cue ingenuity. The apartment complex had 2 light bulbs outside each door that came on each night on a timer. To cure my infinite boredom in a dark house, I brought a couple of those screw-in adapters that turn light sockets into standard power outlets, plugged extension cords into them, and ran them into the house. Bam! I instantly had television, a lamp, a fan, and could charge my phone, and all on the complex's dime. Not my proudest moment, but it felt pretty crafty. I lived in a 3rd-floor apartment with a key-coded foyer door and a keyed apartment door. That day was spent at an outdoor festival, and by the time I came home, the combination of sun, dehydration, and exhaustion, plus the little bit of beer I had before sobering up and venturing home, had me struggling to stay upright and not vomit. Unfortunately, right around that point was when I realized my apartment key was no longer on my keyring. Cell phones are notoriously unreliable at this festival, and even if I could have gotten in touch with my friends, I'd lost it in a relatively wide patch of grass. There was no way that key was coming home. Convinced I was about to spend the night in my laundry room, I found a piece of rusty wire in the parking lot and picked up my apartment's lock. It took about 15 minutes. More distressing than the ease of entry was the fact that no one asked why the disheveled, wobbling girl was in the hallway picking a lock.
Were you ever that 1 in a million? If so, what's your story? I am a 19-year-old male. In August of last year, I was driving with my sister when suddenly her face turned cold. "Gavin, your eyes are yellow," I remember her saying. I quickly pulled down the passenger's mirror, and to my horror, 2 yellow eyes radiated back at me. Fast forward, I spent a month being sick. The initial diagnosis was hepatitis A. Went back to the doctor, nothing was better. Things were worse, in fact. Was sent to the ER, then to the liver transplant unit at UCSF. By this point, my eyes had turned muddy orange, and my pee was the color of a mahogany tree. Anyways, the team of liver doctors at UCSF managed to save my liver. I was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis. Oh, and my eyes were wide again. Not me, my wife. We lived in Jacksonville, Florida. She rarely gets sick, but has mild insomnia. Around Wednesday, she had a low fever and complained of aches and sweats at night and trouble sleeping. That weekend, she wanted to see the doctor. I told her she probably had the flu, just wasn't used to the aches, and she always has trouble sleeping. But if she was still feeling bad Sunday, we'd go to a clinic. Saturday night, she couldn't sleep, so we made an appointment for Sunday afternoon. But on our way there, sure enough, she's feeling better. Doctor checks her out. She's feeling fine now, no fever. He says she probably had meningitis but is recovering. I'm due to go on a business trip to California the next day, Monday, and ask him if he thinks it's fine to go. He says, yeah, no problem. That evening, wife is eating and laughing and all is good. Monday morning, I leave early. That afternoon, my neighbor calls and lets me know my wife was wandering in the street in a delirium. My wife didn't know where she was, so the neighbor drove her to the ER. I book a flight home that night. The hospital checks her out. She has a fever, her blood cell count is in the basement, and she is completely out of it mentally. They're not sure what's wrong, and a bunch of specialists start descending on her. I have to fill out a bunch of paperwork on her medical history, where we've been, etc. They think maybe it's some weird autoimmune disorder. Not good. She gets a bunch of transfusions and put on a cocktail of meds while they figure it out. Third day in the hospital, the infectious disease guy comes in. Blood parasite. Maybe tick-borne. She'd been to the Midwest recently. Could have caught it if she went walking in the woods or a park. Next day he comes in, figured out the parasite. Why didn't you tell me she left the country? Huh? She hasn't. Well, she has malaria. Malaria? I thought you couldn't get that in the US. You can't. You need to go home and bring me her passport. What the heck? I retrieve her passport. CDC comes, does a whole case study on her, which they wouldn't release to us. Mosquito traps set up around the neighborhood. Mysterious vans start driving by spewing clouds of stuff. My wife stays in the ICU for a week, but recovers just fine. If you look at the 2010 CDC infectious disease report, you'll see a discussion of malaria and how the XX number of cases all are related to people recently returned from endemic areas, except for one woman in Duval County, Florida, who received it from a cryptic vector. When I was 14 years old, I woke up one day with heavy stomach cramps. We called the hospital and they told us that I probably have a stomach flu and should go to the doctor next morning. After one of the worst nights ever, vomiting and sleeping next to the toilet, we went to the doctor. I had a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and was aching a lot. The doctor told me I had to go to the ER and have it checked out because she thought my appendix was inflamed and causing the pain. We went to the ER and I stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks, but they couldn't find anything. They treated me with broad-range antibiotics, and after 2 weeks I was feeling a bit better and they told me to go home and recover. The night I got back from the hospital, I went to bed and started hallucinating that I lived in a retirement home and that pirates were coming to steal our food. So I was flailing around trying to fend off pirates when my mother came in and asked what all the fuss was about. I told her what was going on and she looked at me like I had summoned a devil. She took my temperature and she instantly took me to the ER again. I had a 41 degrees Celsius fever. When we went back to the hospital, I got immediately treated for inflammation and they did a wide range of tests again. They saw that something in my body was inflamed, but they couldn't find it. I stayed in the hospital for about 2 more weeks when they finally found what was going on. My appendix was inflamed and burst the night I was having the hallucinations, but on all the scans they couldn't see my appendix. The doctor told me that if I came in 2 days later, I would have died because of the pus flowing in my body. Apparently, there is a 1% chance of all the appendix cases that the appendix is so stretched out that they couldn't see it on the scans or that the area was so inflamed they didn't see it. So after staying on antibiotics for about 2 more weeks, they finally removed my appendix and all the pain was gone. I stayed in the hospital for over 4 weeks just because of my appendix and my bad luck on being that 1%. For my 7th birthday, we went to Disneyland. They just happened to be having a car a day giveaway when we were there. For my 7th birthday, Mickey Mouse gave me a Pontiac Firebird. I'm allergic to potatoes. Never met someone else who is, so I guess it's 1 in a million. Never eaten chips or fries. How I met my wife. I'm from the Netherlands, she's from the US. We met in Israel. It was my first weekend in Israel. Decided to go on a pub crawl to meet some people and have fun. As I'm buying the ticket, my now wife walks up to the counter to also buy a ticket. The girl working there introduces us. We hit it off the first night, but I'm leaving in 2 days to stay with friends of friends in the middle of the desert for 3 months. 2 days after I leave, I lose my phone, don't have any way to get back in touch with her. I had little money and could stay work with the people in the desert. But I kept thinking about her, so after a week, I say I'm leaving. Take the next bus, goes 3 times a week at 5 a.m., and then a train to Tel Aviv. I had no idea how to find her, where to stay, and very little money. I email a couple hostels to find a work-stay agreement. Those jobs are very popular and usually planned months in advance. I get an email back when I arrive in Tel Aviv. I can come in for an interview because they have a spot. This is already ridiculously lucky. Right after the interview and dropping off my belongings, I went back to the first hostel to see if they would give me information. They wouldn't give me anything. Now I'm at a loss. Tel Aviv is a city of more than 500,000 people. I don't know anyone and have little more than the clothes on my back. Kind of defeated, I start wandering around and exploring the city. After a couple hours, I get hungry and decide to treat myself to a restaurant. I'm well out of the tourist area and find a place that's almost empty and rather cheap. I sit down, order a drink and something to eat. As I get my food, I see my now wife walking past the restaurant. She sees me, I see her. I'm literally dumbstruck and just kind of grin and wave. Remember how I lost my phone? She didn't know that and just thought I ignored her. She waves and keeps walking. I throw like 200 shekels, way too much, on the table and sprint after her, explained, and the rest is history. When I was a kid, I was chilling in the water of the Mediterranean Sea in Turkey. Suddenly, I felt an awful burning sensation on my stomach and my legs. I looked like I had been brutally sandpapered and I got a 40°C fever. Turns out I made contact with the jellyfish and later found out that it hadn't happened on that beach for 10 years or so. I was just extremely unlucky. Not sure about the odds on this one, but I survived a non-survivable plane crash. I was on an old PO2, famous for being very safe and uncrashable, on a tour of the desert in western China when I was like 7. My father's friend who hosted me and piloted the plane didn't survive, but somehow I got out with a concussion and apparently passed out for almost a day in the middle of the desert, in the wreckage of the crash, 50 kilometers from the town airport on the edge of the desert. The people who found me were some tree planters. A lot of people who live in these desert towns in China do this. Found me on their way, picking up a shipment, and the only reason they looked was because they were making a bet on how fast the egg would cook in the sand and went off to the road to test. First things first, according to legends, 15 minutes. I never tasted it though. So according to my dad, the theory that I might have lived was because the plane was mostly made out of fabrics and wood. So when the plane crashed, the front half collapsed and took the majority of the impact. Though I got knocked out, I was probably covered under the wreckage and in the shades. It cooled me off enough to survive for a day or so. I was in 2 separate car crashes in 2 separate cars in less than 45 minutes apart. I wasn't the driver for either crash. First car was hit from the side, friend came and picked us up, car lost traction, and we slid off the road and hit a pole. Neither was that bad, just poor timing. I slept wrong one night and pinched a nerve in my neck so severely I lost the right side of my body. It just went silent like it wasn't there for months. I woke up in the worst pain I've ever experienced and couldn't talk, move, or do anything. The ER doctor thought I was having a stroke. My doctor had never seen a case as severe as mine, and it was purely a freak accident. Recovery took months, but I have use of my leg and hand again, with some numbness. Other than pain and spasms, I'm mostly back to normal. A bird got into my room through a tiny hole in the ceiling and took a dump on me. Had 2 11-centimeter benign tumors growing in my spine, resulting in gradual paralysis from my chest down. They had no idea how the tumors formed. Surgery took 11 hours when they thought it would take 4 because the tumors were so complexly woven throughout my spine. I now have pretty much half a spine and chronic pain, but I'd take that over losing my life from paralysis and being unable to breathe. The first one, I don't know about the exact odds, but I was born on 7/7/77 and weighed 7 pounds and 7 ounces. Sadly though, I clocked in at 6:50 a.m. The other is that around the age of 14, I started to notice the outsides of both of my feet starting to get much wider. After a couple years of buying expensive custom-made shoes, they decided to perform surgery on my feet. Turned out I had extra muscle growth along with something else I don't recall at the moment. My podiatrist told me he submitted a scholarly article on it. May also have been genetic, as when my dad was 3, he developed an extra toe growing out of each one of his big toes. I actually know the name for this offhand, and it's called polydactyly. I've got the middle toes on both feet webbed. So did Stalin. Quack. When I was a teenager, I had just started working at the local Sears Auto Center Express lube shop, and on day 1 did a quick orientation and my first oil change. The manager walked away when he felt I was good to go, and the oil change went well. Fast forward a few days later, my manager had asked me to come into his office and he explained that the oil filter I had used had one huge flaw. I didn't know what that was, and it turned out the filter was pressed on backwards into the filter can and it wouldn't allow oil to flow in and it damaged the motor. They had to purchase a new motor for the person and I still kept my job. He said it was a 1 in a million chance that it would have happened, and it did on my first oil change. I had the rarest type of synesthesia, lexical gustatory. It means I taste words. I was struck by lightning while talking on a landline. This was in the early 90s. Lightning struck through the telephone line and traveled through the handset to my ear. My parents drove me to the ER. I couldn't talk very well. My brain knew what I wanted to say, but my mouth didn't want to say it. I had a terrible stutter. My doctor told me that I had had a dose of good old-fashioned electroshock therapy. My speech was normal the next day, but I get a terrible headache whenever a thunderstorm comes through. I have an unknown type of autosomal dominant centronuclear myopathy. My type of it is so rare that they haven't even seen it before. Getting diagnosed was a multi-year struggle. They pretty much had to rule out everything else. It doesn't feel great to be in this club by myself. Countless blood draws, MRIs, CAT scans, and a biopsy and a genetic test. So far, it looks like my father and I are the only ones with it. Yay. As the researchers pointed out, this isn't really rare, just a type that hasn't really been seen in the population yet, meaning there is certainly more people out there, just not tested or diagnosed yet. In the future, I'll probably be 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 100,000. Sorry to make everyone think I was 1 in a million. I'm allergic to the cold. Like, literally. I get intense hives, swelling, I pass out, and throw up. Doesn't even have to be freezing. Below 45 degrees without a jacket, and I can't do it. I have to carry an EpiPen with me in the event that I drink something too cold or have a severe reaction. Bought $3 worth of Pong balls at one of those games at the state fair. I think it was 10 balls, and the grand prize is in the middle, and you have to land it in a small glass container. I was having fun and just decided to throw it by flicking my wrist in a weird way. It bounced around for a while, and landed right in the red glass container, which was the grand prize. Even the worker was surprised that I got it. Had to walk around the state fair with a giant Charmander plush toy after that. Not quite 1 in a million, but close enough. As a child, I had an extremely rare autoimmune disease. On top of having an extremely rare illness, I developed the rarer and most dangerous of the symptoms. My kidneys started shutting down. Most kids recover from this disease, but not always the ones with kidney issues. I was extremely lucky. I did not have to go on dialysis, and my kidneys eventually reached normal functioning levels. It took a decade to be completely cleared of the disease. My mother likes to call me a miracle child, not only because of this, but because she was not supposed to be able to have a kid due to health issues, and had several miscarriages before my stubborn butt decided to be born. Weird stuff. I have symmetric bilateral coloboma of the iris and retina. Essentially, my pupils are shaped like keyholes instead of circles. A single coloboma is pretty rare, double coloboma is even more rare, and double symmetrical, well, you get it. I have a very rare skin disease that only 1 in a million people get. I've been told that I'll probably never meet another person in my lifetime with it. Hailey-Hailey disease for those interested. For those asking, I was diagnosed by a team of dermatologists. They had to take a biopsy of one of my many outbreaks. A picture of that particularly horrible rash is currently in a medical journal, or so I've been told. Yes, it is a very painful disease. Yes, I get steroid injections for it. I also get Botox injections to control sweating and prevent some of my outbreaks. No, I don't know if you have this disease. You have to get a biopsy. Yes, it's inherited. My mother was a carrier, and I've been told my grandmother had the disease for more than half her life. Hailey-Hailey disease is a rare genetic disorder that is characterized by blisters and erosions, most often affecting the neck, armpits, skin folds, and genitals. The lesions may come and go, and usually heal without scarring. Sunlight, heat, sweating, and friction can often aggravate the disorder. The symptoms of Hailey-Hailey disease occur because of the failure of skin cells to stick together, resulting in the breakdown of affected skin layers. Hailey-Hailey disease occurs due to a mutation in a specific gene that creates a protein that is essential for the proper health of skin. The disorder becomes apparent after puberty, usually by the 3rd or 4th decade, but symptoms can develop at any age. I was born 1 pound and 6 ounces in 1998. Doctors said I had like a 15% chance of surviving or something like that. They also said that if I did survive, I would have been a vegetable. So months pass. Funny thing was, I came out of the hospital on the day I was due, came out in February, left the hospital in June. While I am still forming as a baby, and it's 20 years later and I'm alive and healthy. I can walk, talk, and all the normal things. Only thing really wrong with me is my right eye is hanging on a thread because of reasons, and I'm socially autistic. I guess that's 1 in a million. I was so freakishly allergic to ant and bee venom as a child that a single sting from a single little common black ant put me into anaphylactic shock. When my allergist was preparing to start immunotherapy for me, he found that the in-office lab equipment wasn't sensitive enough to measure the infinitesimally small amount of allergen with which to start my titration, so he had to send a sample of my blood to Johns Hopkins so that their lab could determine how much to give me. I did immunotherapy for several years to reach an immune response level at which it would be safe for me to basically exist in a non-frozen climate. Good news though, I'm good now. I've had a few run-ins with ants and wasps since my immunotherapy, and my body didn't freak out and shut down. And research indicates that if it hasn't done that after this long, I'm probably safe for maybe forever. I don't have EpiPens, and I'm not overly afraid of ants or bees. To answer a few questions, I live in Florida. I'm not outdoorsy, but stinging things are everywhere. It is, in fact, the Australia of North America. No, my parents would not move me to the frozen tundra to be a nomadic reindeer herder at my behest. Little black ants do, in fact, sting. Several Lassia subspecies have stingers and venom. When an ant bites you, that's using their mandibles and does not deliver venom. When an ant stings you, that's using their butt needle and delivers the pain juice. Most ants do one or the other. Fire ants do both at the same time. I did some research a while back and found an academic paper that indicated that if I hadn't had a reaction after this many years, the likelihood that I ever would again is vanishingly rare. I wish I could find it again right now, but I'm already late getting ready for work. So if I find it later, I'll post it. I feel completely safe having a cell phone instead of an EpiPen. I was actually homeless for 4 years between 19 and 23 years old. As silly as it sounds, I used to earn some extra money at the time by helping around in a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. It was my biggest hobby when I was younger and was something I felt confident about. I also didn't have a passport or a bank account, so I couldn't get a normal job. I'm in the UK. Anyway, so at the time I was stuck not earning enough money, without a passport, a bank account, or a real job. In the UK, you won't get hired by 99% of companies if you don't have a passport to prove you have the right to work. So one day I got a phone call from a studio asking if I played Yu-Gi-Oh and would consider myself a geek, also if I wanted to be in a TV show. They said they would send me to another country as part of it. Being homeless, the biggest problems is being bored, so naturally I said yes, but told them I don't have a passport. No problem, we'll get you one straight away and pay for it ourselves. I ended up on a show called Geeks that you can still watch on Channel 4 OD. Because I got this passport, I was finally able to get a job, a bank account, and finally a house. Now I'm looking after my 10-month-old daughter who's playing while I type this. So Yu-Gi-Oh saved me from being homeless. I might be an anime character. TLDR, was homeless until a TV company gave me a passport allowing me to get a job and a house because I played Yu-Gi-Oh. This blew up more than expected, so here's some answers to some questions. How did you have a phone? I had a cheap brick phone that would run on battery for a week. Think old Nokias. I used to charge at my local library in Peckham, London. How did I help in Yu-Gi-Oh? I was a judge for the tournaments. They're a referee for the game. How did the TV company find out about you? I was a judge for the game. The TV show was looking for geeks with different hobbies, and they found out about Yu-Gi-Oh! After assuming a Google search, they found the person who ran my local tournament to recommend different players and people, and she recommended me. Why do you need a passport? So in the UK, you need a government picture ID and a national insurance number, like social security number, in order to prove you're allowed to work in the UK. I have migraines that cause me to go part or near completely blind, so I can't drive due to the risk. So I don't have access to a driver's license as ID, leaving me only with the passport. I'm getting some people who are a little doubtful that it could be so hard to get a job while homeless, or to get ID and are shocked it's taking me long to get out. What's important isn't what you know about the world right now. What's important is what I knew about the world as a 19-year-old that just left school. Think back to that age and honestly ask yourself how easy it would be to get a job without a bank, a home address, ID, or experience of anything. Of course now, as a 27-year-old, I'm armed with so much more knowledge to find a way out. I had 8 wisdom teeth. The dentist had never seen anything like it and called the whole office in to marvel at my teeth. Had pygmy glandular fever when I was 16. Nothing special about that. Had pneumonia a few months later, probably due to my weak immune system from the first disease, which caused my lungs to collapse, very unlikely for a 17-year-old. The hospital I was in couldn't do any more for me, so another hospital came with a rescue team of 8 people and a heart-lung machine, easymode. Very rare that hospitals have those that can be transported. The hospital only used it the second time and the first time successfully, to pick me up. They brought me to the other hospital. I was in a coma for a couple more days, but made it out of the hospital within 3 weeks after that, just before Christmas. A big newspaper wanted the story for Christmas miracles, but no thanks. I own a Lego minifigure called Mr. Gold. This particular minifig was to celebrate the 10th series of the Lego figurine line. They're sort of like grab bags. You can feel for them, but you don't know what minifigure you're really going to get. So, because they were celebrating, they thought it was a good idea to only make 5,000 of these. Anyways, when I was younger, and even now, I was really good knowing which figures they are simply by looking at the figure's pieces and feeling out those pieces. I really liked the minifigures because I thought they were really cool and unique, so I really wanted Mr. Gold, and me and my mom hunted for it for a long time, but after a while, I gave up. Then one day, I was at the Lego store and felt the distinct diamond piece and freaked out. Finding this figure was a downright fantasy. I'm 18 now and still want to relive 12-year-old me's pure joy as he opened the packaging. My dad once asked me for a quarter. I tossed it to him and it went directly into his shirt pocket. Guys, Dude Perfect is losing his mind right now.
What was your "I was the only one to get away" story? Loads of people at a pub in my town that was notorious for not IDing, so I had loads of underage people in there drinking. It was their busiest night of the year and the police raided it. Most people ran out the back and some hopped the fence. The rest tried to hide in the toilets. I just sat there drinking as the police came through the pub, pulling everyone out of the toilets and back inside, IDing them all and taking names and addresses. The people who had jumped the fence decided to stand on the corner just outside to wait for their friends who hadn't been so lucky, they thought. Next thing they knew, the police had come outside and started IDing everyone stood on the corner, like they had inside. Myself and 2 friends, one of age, the other, like me, not yet 18, had just sat there through the entire incident, drinking our pints and joking on with some of the better-natured cops. They didn't bother IDing anyone who hadn't run, so I was one of the very few friends who got away with it scot-free. This is beautiful. My best friend from college used to say, "If you act like you own the place, you own the place." We used to do crazy stuff and no one would say a thing because we acted like nothing was wrong. I was gambling in Vegas on a Friday with a friend's bachelor party coming up the next day. Playing blackjack, mostly just killing time waiting for dinner, but the table was on fire. It was a full table shortly after I sat down. I played a couple of hours and the table was all up on money, anywhere from $50,000 to $800. The $800 was me. Everyone else was literally up at least 10 grand. It's about 20 minutes before I'm supposed to meet up with someone, so I call it and head back to my room so I can shower and change for the night. Head out for dinner and have a good night. The next morning my buddies call me down to the lobby to meet up. As I get down there, out of sheer coincidence, they're talking to the dealer that was at the table when I left. She says, "There he is," and points at me. Friends are like, "Holy crap!" Turns out I was the only one that walked away from that table with $1 to my name. Someone taught me that the moment the dealer mentions how well you're doing, it's time to quit playing. High school party, one of my first. I was wasted, throwing up in the basement bathroom when the cops arrived. Eventually, they were let inside and stormed into the basement where everyone was hiding loudly with the lights off, with their flashlights beaming down into the dark. I want to say there were at least 30 people rounded up into the living room where they started calling parents. The host of the party saw me sitting on the mantel, having accepted my fate. She knew my dad would literally whoop my butt and sent me out the window. I knocked over the grill on my way out and walked around the back of the house, through a few backyards, and to the neighborhood pool where I cuddled up with some bushes for a few hours. When I saw the last cop finally leave, I sprinted back to the house and knocked on the door to be let in, scaring the crap out of the 3 survivors. A few dozen people were charged with underage drinking. Big house party. I drank the wrong drink, got rehypnol, went to my car, and passed out for the rest of the night. Everyone was on this big deck and it collapsed. Then the cops showed up and acted like total members even though people were injured. I slept in my car through the whole thing. For clarity, it was in Vancouver, BC, Canada. I suspect roofies because I was on my second drink of the night when everything started feeling really weird. I knew something wasn't right, so I decided to go out to my car and sleep it off. I barely remember this. I was informed by a friend the next day why I went out to my car. Smoking up in a truck with some friends of a friend senior year in an empty parking lot of some park. Already high as frick when suddenly the Taco Bell we had gorged on earlier is going berserk in my bowels and holy crap, I need a bathroom. I ran or stumbled my way to the public restroom on the other side of the parking lot. I finish, and as I'm about to walk out, I see what looks like red lights illuminating the entrance. I start losing my mind. I know it's cops, and everyone's high as frick. At this point, I knew A, my friends are effed, B, what the frick should I do? I retreated in the furthest stall and texted my parents saying I was crashing at some dude's house. Ended up falling asleep in the stall. Woke up the next morning and got another friend to pick me up. Got away, no one ratted me out, and that's how Taco Bell simultaneously destroyed and saved my butt at the same time. Good God, the 2 exceptions to the substances that are almost entirely negative in their effects on human subjects, rehypnol and Taco Bell. Consider yourself very lucky and oh my God, I am shooketh. Freshman year of college. I had a group of friends that I'd smoke with. Towards the end of the year, I decided I didn't feel like smoking anymore, and also I had to get clean to apply for summer jobs. By this point, they are getting more and more cocky, and start getting high in this girl's minivan in a campus parking lot. One day, I meet up with these guys to hear that they finally got busted. It's not a surprise to me because doing that in a car on campus is freaking stupid. And here is the most important lesson, kids. The school brought my friends in and presented them with a list of names. Every single dealer we knew of, even the ones we didn't use, was on that list. My friends were given the choice between expulsion or pointing out the dealers they knew on the list. Cops didn't really care about a few stoners smoking on campus, they cared about the dealers. So if you're thinking about making some extra cash selling illicit substances in college, make sure you're as careful as possible, or just don't do it. People will always choose to rat you out when given the choice between that or their expensive college careers. I was on holiday in Bali. A policeman flagged us down as we were waiting at traffic lights on our rented mopeds. I just decided to buzz it through the now green traffic lights. They got pulled and fined a fair amount for driving without a license. I felt a bit crappy afterwards, but they said they would have done the same if they had the balls to. We also had crates of booze which I didn't want taken off me. In summary, I choose beer over my friends. My first house party in college was on Halloween my freshman year. Naturally, everyone was in costume and about half the people were underage. I wasn't drinking, but my friends were. Around midnight, an older guy, 40s, walked in dressed as a cop. Me, being one of the few sobers at the party, realized he was an actual cop. I tried to convince my friends to leave, but they all said the guy was just in a costume, so I left on my own. I walked right past the cop, told him to have a good night, and walked home. I found out the next day all of my friends got tickets for underage drinking. I was abducted in Iraq while working in IT, along with 4 other people. After 946 days, I was released. Everyone else taken with me was killed. This is an article I wrote about my experience. That can be found at the forum in the video description, folks. That's, a step up from the people here who got in trouble with the cops. I went to a private high school and was part of a group of about 20 people who knew about a tent hidden in the woods behind our school. People would go there and do the deed after school, smoke green herb, and do hood rat crap. Someone got in trouble and ratted out all of us in an attempt to lessen her punishment. Apparently, she was also going to be expelled, on the last day before finals. We all got called down to the detention room, and the dean told us that they had found drug paraphernalia and weapons, an airsoft pistol, and made us all write down everything we knew about the tent, and who we've seen at the tent. 19 people ratted out everyone in that room, including themselves, and were given pretty harsh punishments. 3 were expelled, some were suspended into the next year, and the rest got demerits. I wrote down, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Went and talked to the deans and said the same thing and was off the hook. I'm certain my name was on every list, and I'm sure they wanted to nail me, but I denied, and I guess they were satisfied with 19 people giving themselves up. My very first college professor gave me advice I remember to this day. First day of English class. Don't record it, don't write it down, and deny, deny, deny. One time, my psychology prof was in a bad mood, so he started asking everyone for their student ID. Rules say you have to show it to a uni official if they ask for it. I didn't have mine that day and didn't know what the punishment was, but I knew I wanted none of it, so I tried to get out of it. So what to do? I applied psychology. Before he gets to me, I walk up to him and ask him a question. When he comes around, he just points at me and mutters to himself that he'd already checked me. It wasn't a sure thing. If he had asked for my ID when I asked the question, I was screwed. It required careful timing to ask the questions before he saw me, so he was already thinking about that by the time he turned to face me. In the end, something like half the class didn't have their ID that day. Turns out all they do is tell you to carry it. As our friends in the first story pointed out, confidence is everything. Well played, university student. Well played. Years back in high school, my buddy threw a huge party. Unfortunately, not just our usual group showed up. It was well over 100 people. Anyways, I was always on the lookout for cops or shady people. I had my reasons as to how screwed I would be if I got caught drinking. Sports, school, family, scholarships, etc. So the party goes on. More and more people we don't normally hang out with show up. So I grab my buddy and our DD and say, "We need to leave now. You can crash at my place, I don't care. Let's go." We hop into his car. That's when I throw a duffel bag of beer drunkenly into his trunk, followed by the sound of tabs popping up and beer spilling. We pull out and drive away. We get a quarter mile down the road before we see 4 cop cars headed to the house. The party was immediately shut down. Countless tickets written. People kicked off sports teams or clubs. What's funny is this same scenario happened 2 other times in high school. I left a party before the cops busted everyone and people got tickets the day before graduation. And another time I left a kickback which ended in the arrests of a few friends. My reputation still holds true. I always leave minutes before the cops arrive. "I leave minutes before the cops arrive," said the narc. Only narcs call people narcs, narc. Was at a real big Fish concert. We'd been following the tour for a while. Undercovers caught my dude rolling a doobie in the car. Then the other dude with us was coming by. I'm throwing as many GTFO, son, looks as I can, but they popped him for having pills when he came by. So everyone I was with, including the dude who owns the car, got arrested. Thousands of miles from home. As the smartest in the group is getting cuffed, he asks the cops to give me his keys and their tickets. So I had a pocket of concert tickets, a car that isn't mine, and like $100. Took the car, bought a couple of 100 bottles of water, and a few 30-packs and went back to the concert. Sold all the water for $1 each, most of the beers for like $3 each except for the 15 or so I drank, and scalped every ticket for like $120 each. Showed up at the jail with a random girl from the concert, kind of a little worse for wear, and bailed all my friends out on ones. Then brought them a hotel room. Can't leave my people behind, man. Turn up in the school washroom with my friends, with the lights off and the music blasting out. People were hanging off the stalls and making as much noise as possible. Teacher comes in and writes our names down. She gets to me and asks, "Have I already written down your name?" To which I say, "Yes," and walk away. Friends got detention. Apparently someone cracked the mirror in the washroom and no one fessed up, so they all went down together. Drunk with a few friends, walking through the docks/trendy bar area and see an industrial building for recycling plastic with a tantalizingly easy-to-climb roof. We climb up on the roof. Someone reports burglars on the roof, because recycled plastic and trash must be a big target, and cops show up. I casually climb onto a tree that overhangs the roof and quickly pass out, and the cops don't see me. My friends don't rat me out, they get banned for life from a bar in a completely different area of the dock complex, because the cops told them they caught them trying to cut a hole in the roof/burgle them all. Utter bullcrap, we were stargazing and drunk chatting. Anyway, I woke up a few hours later and asked why they left me up there, and I'm reminded of the whole cop thing and informed they weren't arrested but were banned from a bar. We went to the bar the next day to make a point. High school party. The girl decides to spread her legs and have adult fun with 12 guys in a room. I passed out before my turn happened. They all got chlamydia. One night, quite a few years ago, one of my buddies threw a party with about 50 people. We were mostly all under 21 at the time and had a few other illegal substances as well. Soon enough, the cops showed up. By the time they had opened the doors, I found myself a nice tool bench to hide inside where the opening for the chair was. So this was in the garage, and they also had black lights in, so it was difficult to see clearly. So the cops started to give people breathalyzers, all the while I'm crawled up in this little hole for hours. After about 2 hours, they finally load up the last wagon, and I think they pull away. I throw out my legs, which are completely asleep, and right after, I hear the cops starting to head back inside. I crawl back in as they started to take pictures and dump out the alcohol. The best part about this is that with the black lights, the flash from the camera gave better sight of the room. I have a friend that works in the police station that told me you can see me scrunched inside this little area on one of the pictures. The cops apparently weren't even angry, just laughed and said they were somewhat impressed. We've had some pretty lighthearted stuff so far, so I'll just warn you that the next story is a little grimmer. I'm the only one left from my group of 3 best friends since 3rd grade. First one hung himself because he was a pain pill addict, and I think the pressure of addiction and owing a lot of people money got to him. Ate a ton of Klonopins and hang himself up on his mum's porch with a dog leash. My wife was dating him when I met her, and I always joke about it when people ask how we met. I say she was dating my friend, and I stole her, and when they ask if we're still friends, I get quiet and say, he offed himself. Second one was a smack addict. Wrecked his car bad when he nodded off, and he lived. After getting home from the hospital, he shot up again and nodded off while eating cereal and choked. His mom found him blue in the face. He lived, but is a completely different person who will never be independent again. The third one just died recently. He was the most badass person ever. Had so much fun in a life he loved. He was that dude on your social media you lived vicariously through. Badass chicks every month. Awesome road trips to Mexico one week and Alaska the next. He loved living the biker life. I couldn't even cry when he died because he died doing what he loved. He had literally said to me that he would rather die on his bike than doing anything else. Anyway, this will probably be buried, but it felt good to write. I've been off substances, except drink, for a while now, and my wife and I are really happy. Glad I made it out of that town alive. Definitely miss my bros, though. We had some great frickin' times. During school, my friends and I sat at the same table. They, and me, had a food fight. However, I sat at the perfect angle to where lunch people couldn't see me throwing food. I didn't get caught, and the rest of my friends had to clean the tables for a week and got detention. Lollapalooza a few years back. Me and my one friend and about 10 other random kids were walking around the festival looking for a place to hop the fences and sneak in because none of us bought tickets. We finally find an area where there are only a couple of security guards. There was a dozen of us that hopped this tall fence at the same time. Little did we know that the Chicago police security tent for the festival was right where we all hopped the fence. As soon as we hopped the fence, about 8 cops came running out of nowhere, and at least half the group is on the ground with security holding them down immediately. The security firm had some athletic, jacked types. The cops get the other 4 kids after about a 15-foot intense dash. I swear kids were getting tackled left and right. These cops and security were literally spearing kids into the ground and shoving their faces in the dirt. It was insane. Me and my one friend make it about another half a block and run into another fence. This time, 2 cops are chasing us. As we are hurdling the second fence, one grabs my arm and tried pulling me down. I shimmied my way onto the other side. We see one more scalable fence and hop that too. At this point, we realize that we're backstage for M&M, and we head into 2 porta potties backstage for about 10 minutes to hide out just as the show is starting. We realized the cops have better things to do and probably quit searching for us. We head up the side stairs to M&M and literally get to the side of the stage. Nothing better than an adrenaline-filled sprint hopping multiple fences and making it on stage with M&M for free. My friend's Southern Comfort pint didn't fall out of his pocket, so we had that to drink on. Nothing beats being 18 without a care in the world. It was like sneaking into prison. So here's my crazy story. So my freshman year of college, me and a couple of buddies ended up getting a house together. Mistake 1. We would routinely host parties that would become way too out of control to handle. One night, we were having our Halloween bash thing and planned on having maybe 100 to 150 people. So beforehand, we decided to go in on a couple of ounces of green herb and make brownies or smoke until we couldn't see. We ended up getting so high that we forgot we were having people over, as well as the fact that we had made herb brownies. 11 p.m. rolls around and there's a knock on the door. We're all freaking out thinking it's the cops, so nobody went to the door. About 2 minutes later, someone walks in from the back door, which we had apparently left unlocked. Turns out to be a good friend who's there for the party, along with 20 other people. So they head to the basement to get drinking and whatnot. This literally happens once every 5 minutes until we have a line out the front door and onto the street. At this point, I'm way too high to want to have anything to do with this, so I'm sitting on the couch watching a documentary on ancient aliens on Netflix. This continues for about 2 hours uninterrupted until I get a call from a friend of mine saying there are 4 cop cars headed down my street and that he just turned around. So now I'm freaking out and I head downstairs and shut the music off and turn the lights on, attempting to explain to this crowd of people that there are cops coming and they are going to be very angry and to leave. Of course, nobody listens except the guys with warrants who go sprinting down the alley. As soon as I make it upstairs, I hear my roommate yelling, saying not to answer the door. The police are here. So my first instinct is to try and hide, but then I remember the weed brownies. I grabbed them out of the fridge and darted upstairs as fast as I could to our attic entrance. The way our attic was set up was that it was accessible via what looked like a regular closet door, but was actually frickin' Narnia, and that's where I wanted to hide. I get in the attic and we had moving boxes in there, so I made a fort out of them and just kind of sat in there, listening to everything that was going on, eating an entire pan of brownies. Mistake number 2. The cops ended up clearing the house after some drunk moron let them in. They gave practically everyone underage a ticket, leaving breathalyzer strips all over the house. They gave so many tickets, I could hear them joking about running out and going back to the cruiser for more. 2 of the girls that got underage were actually Norwegian tennis players on scholarships, who also had to get their stomachs pumped. They are no longer playing tennis. After they'd cleared the house of partygoers, they had all of my roommates in the living room yelling at them about how many times they've come out here, and about how it always smells like pot. Then I hear at the bottom of the stairs, "If there's anybody out there, come up right now!" And I'm crapping my pants. Then the footsteps. At this moment, I'm literally melting into the floor, drawing parallels between myself and the story of Anne Frank. The cop opens the attic door and shines his light in, but I'm hiding like a damn ninja and probably says to himself, "Screw that, I'm not going to look that hard." Long story short, all of my roommates ended up spending the night in jail for various illicit substances, drinking, and maintaining nuisance, or whatever the cops could think of, and I spent my night hiding in the attic, which to this day we refer to as Anne Franking. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.